Chapter 24-29. Sacrifice. All of a sudden, two streaks of translucent light shot out of the miniature figure's eyes, and the fingers of the giant golden hand around it were instantly severed, following which it sped away as a streak of golden light. Who would have thought that a gold-devouring immortal of this caliber could be found in a lower realm? If I could tame it and take it back to the true immortal realm, it would be an extremely powerful ally. An elated look appeared on Ma Liang's face as he pointed a finger at the fleeing streak of golden light, and several more giant golden hands were conjured up before grabbing toward the streak of light while releasing bursts of powers of laws. A sharp screeching sound suddenly rang out within the streak of golden light, following which countless streaks of invisible sword chi erupted forth in all directions. A violent explosion rang out as the massive golden hands were destroyed by the sword chi, but more giant hands appeared in the nearby area to take their place. At the same time, the power of laws had impacted Jin Tong, causing it to become extremely slow and sluggish. Simultaneously, thunderous rumbling rang out from the golden volcanoes down below, and they transformed into several tens of giant golden armored warriors that sped directly toward Jin Tong. Under these circumstances, there was virtually no chance for Jin Tong to escape. A faint smile appeared on Ma Liang's face upon seeing this. However, his aura was severely diminished, clearly indicating that he had expended a vast amount of immortal spiritual power during the prior battle. It should be about time, Han Li suddenly murmured to himself as he appraised an azure mirror in front of him at the foot of the formation core countless kilometers away. The surface of the mirror was displaying an image that depicted Jin Tong, which had transformed into a massive golden beetle, and it was clashing with several tens of opposing golden armored warriors. Jin Tong had been sent by Han Li to spy on Ma Liang so that he could constantly monitor the situation and ensure that nothing unexpected took place. I have to do it. I didn't think that I would have to use this final trump card. The Tianyuan continent will be severely negatively impacted after this battle, but I had no choice but to do this for the sake of the entire spirit realm, another figure murmured to himself as he sat on a giant formation within an empty and dim hall. He then flipped a hand over to produce a glowing silver formation plate, and countless silver runes surged out of the formation plate before flowing into a formation in a frenzy. Under the illumination of the silver light, it was revealed that the man holding the formation plate was none other than a second Ming Zun. Yun Dan and Yu Shu were seated at the other formation core with their eyes closed when the nearby world's origin chi suddenly stirred, and the 8 pillars as well as the altar began to release fearsome law fluctuations in unison. The two of them immediately opened their eyes upon sensing this, and horrified looks also appeared on the face of all of the trade guild guards nearby. Why has the world's origin chi here suddenly become so violent? Yun Dan exclaimed as he rose to his feet. Could it be that something's gone wrong with the bipolar annihilation formation? Yu Dan speculated. Yun Dan looked up into the sky and his expression immediately changed drastically. Hold on, why has the power of laws gathered above us? It seems like it's specifically targeting us. We have to get out of here. Yu Shu had always had full trust in Yun Dan, and she hurriedly swept a sleeve through the air upon hearing this, releasing a ball of black light that transformed into a black flying carriage with 3 pairs of silver wings on its sides. However, before the two of them got onto the carriage, the altar and the 8 pillars shuddered before each releasing a pillar of 5-colored light up into the heavens. Law fluctuations converged in the sky, and a light formation with a diameter of close to 10 kilometers took shape. A burst of buzzing rang out from the light formation, and a 5-colored vortex immediately appeared at its center, then released a burst of crimson light that descended directly upon the formation core. A semi-spherical crimson light barrier immediately took shape, trapping Yun Dan and Yu Shu as well as the trade guild guard beneath it like a giant bowl. At the same time, a burst of power of laws filled the entire area within the light barrier, and the magic power within Yun Dan and Yu Shu's bodies immediately became extremely sluggish. Let's get out from underground. Yun Dan yelled as he grabbed onto Yu Shu's arm and instantly appeared on the flying carriage. Yu Shu hurriedly made a hand seal, and the carriage immediately transformed into a ball of black light that plunged down toward the ground, only to be repelled back by a layer of azure light that abruptly appeared over the earth. Yun Dan let loose an enraged roar as he summoned a long golden halberd that was around 10 feet in length before swinging it down with vicious might. A resounding boom rang out as a scintillating golden sun exploded upon the ground, sending shockwaves proliferating outward in all directions and knocking over many of the nearby trade guild guards. However, once the golden light faded, the azure light barrier on the ground was revealed to be completely unscathed. How could this be? Your spirit light halberd has never failed to destroy its target before. Yu Shu exclaimed. Do you still not understand? We all fell into Mingzun's trap. This is not a formation core, it's a trap designed specifically to target the two of us. Yun Dan said as he stared intently at the azure light on the ground with a dark expression. Yu Shu faltered slightly upon hearing this before gritting her teeth as she asked, "Why would he do this? How does he benefit from trapping us here? Besides, is this restriction really powerful enough to trap us here?" There's only one way to find out whether this restriction is powerful enough to truly trap us. As for why he did this. A cold light flashed through Yun Dan's eyes as he hurled his golden halberd toward the altar. An earth-shattering boom rang out as the altar exploded as a ball of golden light, sending countless rocks flying in all directions. Only a giant crater in the ground remained in its place. Mingzun never left a profound heavenly treasure here. He wants us to act as substitutes for the profound heavenly treasure. Yun Dan said in a cold voice. How dare he? We have to get out of here right away, Yu Shu said with a panicked expression. There's no need to fear. I didn't know about this trap, but I prepared many trump cards in anticipation for this battle against the true immortal. As soon as his voice trailed off, Yun Dan opened his mouth to release an inky black bead. He caught the bead before hurling it viciously toward the crimson light barrier nearby, and almost at the exact same moment, the light barrier released a burst of crimson light that swept through the nearby area. All of the trade guild guards who came into contact with the crimson light immediately exploded into clouds of blood mist. The black bead was also swept up by the crimson light before it had even reached the light barrier, and it was instantly reduced to a plume of black smoke. That's impossible. Yun Dan's face turned deathly pale upon seeing this, and he was unable to maintain his composure any longer. Yun Shu was also greatly alarmed as she frantically swept her sleeves through the air, releasing a flurry of treasures, but all of them also exploded in the face of the oncoming crimson light. At this point, all of the trade guild guards had been reduced to blood mist, and the crimson light was converging toward them from all directions. The two of them exchanged a glance, and both of them could see their own despair mirrored in one another's eyes. If their powers hadn't been severely debilitated by the law fluctuations, perhaps they would have been able to pose some resistance, but as things were now, they were completely powerless. As a final desperate act, they released all of their treasures at once while injecting what little remained of their magic power into the protective spiritual light around their bodies. In the next instant, the crimson light inundated both of them, and within mere moments, they had also been reduced to blood mist that was drawn into the vortex in the sky. In the other formation core, Hanli was situated in a small area encompassed under a yellow light barrier, looking up at the buzzing giant light formations in the sky with a grim expression. All of the trade guild guards here had also been reduced to blood mist that was drawn into the light formation, and all of a sudden, the formation vanished into thin air. Jin Tong was being held down by several golden armored guards at once, and a series of purplish golden threads of light had appeared before binding toward its body. Haha, there's no way you can escape from my spirit domain, let's see what you're going to do now. Ma Liang chortled with glee as he drifted toward Jin Tong. Right at this moment, energy fluctuations erupted down below, and colossal light formation that encompassed virtually the entirety of Baleful Cry Point appeared on the ground with Ma Liang situated at its exact center. Ma Liang's heart jolted slightly upon seeing this, and his expression changed drastically as he swept his spiritual sense toward the light formation down below. Almost at the exact same moment, a translucent thread of light shot out of the center of the light formation, piercing through the entire heaven and earth in a flash. Ma Liang's pupils contracted drastically at the sight of the translucent thread, as if he were witnessing something extremely terrifying, and he immediately shot back as a ball of golden light. In the next instant, the translucent thread exploded into a pillar of scorching white light that erupted forth in all directions, instantly inundating everything within a radius of thousands of kilometers. All of the golden armored guards were destroyed within the white light, and Jin Tong transformed into a giant beetle again. At the same time, it curled up into a shimmering golden ball with purplish golden patterns all over its surface. As for Ma Liang, he only managed to flee for a short distance before he was also inundated by the white light with a horrified expression. The azure mirror in front of Hanli exploded, but the dazzling white light displayed in the mirror was visible in the distance. Hanli looked up and cast a grim gaze toward the center of Baleful Cry Point, where rumbling booms were ringing out incessantly alongside the flashing of white light. A hint of awe surfaced in Han Li's eyes as he sensed the energy fluctuations surging forth from that direction. This bipolar destruction formation is truly fearsome. If I hadn't set up these protective measures in advance, I most likely would have perished here as well, Han Li sighed. Dao Xie's voice rang out in response. If this had been a true bipolar destruction formation, you would have indeed been no match for the power of its self-detonation. However, due to the alterations we made, the power of the self-detonation is only around 1/10 of what it otherwise would be, so there's a very good chance that you'll be able to survive with your powers. As soon as the voice trailed off, Dao Xie appeared behind Han Li amid a flash of silver lightning. In that case, wouldn't there be an even greater chance that the true immortal would survive? Han Li asked. That's correct, Dao Xie replied. By your estimations, how much power would that true immortal be able to retain once if he managed to escape the explosion? Han Li asked with a contemplative expression. That's hard to say, but he most likely won't be able to maintain his true immortal body, and he'll suffer backlash to a certain extent. I don't know what secret technique he used to allow him to oppose the restrictive power of this realm, but it's definitely going to come back to bite him, Dao Xie said. In that case, it sounds like you approve of my plan to go and take a look, Han Li said. That's ultimately up to you. The enemy is no ordinary true immortal, so there's a very good chance that he'll be carrying true soul pills. If you can obtain one, then it'll be a lot easier for you to transcend your ascension tribulation, Dao Xie replied after a brief hesitation. I see. It looks like I have no choice but to take a risk then. Thankfully, in his current state, I'll be able to escape even if I can't defeat him, Han Li said with a faint smile, then swept a sleeve through the air to conjure up a silver lightning formation on the ground. Lightning flashed brightly within the formation, and both Han Li and Dao Xie vanished on the spot. At the center of Baleful Cry Point, the white light faded, and the entire area within a radius of thousands of kilometers had caved in by over 100 feet, creating a massive artificial basin. The entire surface of the basin was as smooth as a mirror with no pits or bumps whatsoever, and there were two objects hovering above the center of the basin. One of them was a massive golden ball that had been entirely charred black, and it was giving off a burnt scent, as if it had been completely roasted. The other object was a huge purplish golden crystal, within which was an indistinct humanoid figure. The crystal was the first one to shatter, and Ma Liang emerged in a fully nude state. Not only had he returned to his human form, his face was completely pale and devoid of color, and he wore a very dark expression as he inspected his surroundings. As expected of an immortal formation to be able to unleash this much power. It's a pity that it was incomplete. Otherwise, Ma Liang murmured to himself, but before he could finish his sentence, a series of pink cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of the golden ball. Immediately thereafter, slabs of cooked meat fell away, and a huge shimmering golden beetle appeared. Ma Liang faltered slightly upon seeing this before his eyes lit up, and he exclaimed, "Who would have thought that a gold-devouring immortal in a mere lower realm has mastered such a profound defensive ability? Haha, this insect's aptitude far exceeds what I had expected." He then immediately flipped a hand over to produce a silver talisman, which he prepared to toss toward Jin Tong. At this point, Jin Tong's aura had also become significantly diminished, but a fierce look flashed through its eyes as it prepared to engage Ma Liang in battle. Right at this moment, countless arcs of silver lightning sprang out of thin air amid a rumbling thunderclap, instantly forming a silver lightning formation that was several tens of feet in size. Ma Liang's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately redirected his silver talisman toward the lightning formation. The talisman instantly transformed into a giant silver axe that was over 100 feet in length before crashing down viciously toward the formation. Even before it had reached the formation, a glacial aura swept forth from the axe. Two indistinct humanoid figures appeared within the lightning formation, and one of them glanced at the oncoming giant axe before raising a hand to release a streak of azure sword chi in retaliation. The two clashed and both were instantly repelled backward. The giant silver axe disintegrated into specks of spiritual light, while the streak of azure sword chi returned to its owner's grasp before transforming into miniature azure sword. The duo within the lightning formation were naturally none other than Han Li and Dao Xie. Looks like more people with death wishes. Is that an immortal puppet? A hint of surprise appeared on Ma Liang's face as he identified the nature of Dao Xie. As expected of a true immortal to have so easily identified Brother Xie. Judging from your current state, the backlash from the spirit realm must have been quite severe. How much of your power have you retained? Han Li asked with a faint smile. At the same time, Jin Tong flew toward him as a ball of golden light before quickly vanishing up his sleeve. Looks like that immortal puppet must have told you about realm backlash. Even with just 1/10 of my power, it's a simple matter for me to kill the two of you. However, I can spare you if you offer that gold-devouring immortal up to me with both hands, Maliang said with a cold smile. Are you referring to my gold-devouring beetle monarch? Hee, I'm afraid I can't agree to that, Hanli chuckled in response. In that case, I'll just have to kill you and tame that gold-devouring immortal, Maliang said as he made a grabbing motion, upon which the crimson seal appeared in his grasp amid a flash of crimson light. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and the Provenance True Devil projection emerged behind him amid a flash of golden light. At the same time, a series of azure sword projections erupted out of his body before rapidly multiplying to form a sea of swords that numbered in the thousands. As for Daoist Xie, arcs of silver lightning erupted out of his body, giving him the appearance of an almighty lightning god. Right at this moment, Han Li felt a burst of heat in front of his chest, and a vial-shaped azure projection emerged through his clothes before rising straight up toward the heavens. Almost at the exact same moment, a dark green vial flew out of Maliang's sleeve before heading directly toward Han Li while emitting a faint buzzing sound. Maliang reflexively swept the sleeve through the air to catch the small green vial, but a hint of incredulity immediately appeared in his eyes at the sight of the vial projection on Han Li's chest. You have the heaven-controlling vial? Haha, I've been searching the entire spirit realm for this vial, only for it to be presented to my doorstep. Looks like there's no need for me to track down that traitor now. I can just offer this vial to the Patriarch, and he'll certainly reward me handsomely for my efforts, Maliang chortled with glee. Heaven-controlling vial? What are you talking about? Han Li's expression changed drastically as he focused his gaze on the small green vial that Maliang was holding. Don't try to tell me that you don't have a vial like this. The one that I have here is only a replica of the heaven-controlling vial, but there's no mistaking its ability to sense the original, Maliang said with a cold expression. Is this what you're referring to? Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he flipped a hand over to produce a small azure vial. Indeed, the vial was completely identical to the one being held by Maliang, except it was of a slightly lighter shade, making it appear even more mundane. That's right. Hold on. This seems to only be an empty vessel without a vial spirit. Where did you hide the vial spirit? Maliang's expression changed drastically as he looked down at the green vial in his own hand to discover that it was displaying no further reactions. Vial spirit? What's that supposed to be? Han Li asked as his eyes narrowed slightly. Chapter 2431, Slaying the Immortal 1. You don't know what a vial spirit is? Looks like you don't have anything to do with that traitor then. In any case, it's a massive pleasant surprise to be able to recover the vessel. As for what the vial spirit is, a being from a lower realm like you has no right to know about it. After I capture you and search your soul, I'll send you on your way, Maliang said with a cold smile. As soon as his voice trailed off, the dark green vial in his hand vanished, while the crimson seal in his other hand was tossed forward. All of a sudden, the crimson seal vanished, but 8 rivers of blood descended from the heavens before transforming into 8 5-clawed blood dragons that pounced viciously toward Han Li. These 8 blood dragons were all comparable to Grand Ascension stage beings, and in Maliang's eyes, they were more than enough to take care of Han Li's duo. Right at this moment, Daoist Xie transformed into a giant golden crab amid a flash of silver lightning, then swung its giant pincers viciously through the air, sending 2 balls of lightning the size of houses hurtling directly toward 2 of the blood dragons. He then flew forward as a ball of lightning himself, and thus, a fierce battle ensued between the golden crab and the 2 blood dragons. Meanwhile, Han Li took a deep breath and stowed his azure vial away, and the sea of azure swords around him suddenly transformed into a massive sword formation that spanned an area of over 100 acres. He pointed a finger at the sword formation from afar, and a ball of azure light appeared at the center of the formation before expanding rapidly, following which a giant azure dragon that was several thousand feet in length flew out of the azure light. The dragon was of an exuberant green color, and every single one of its scales was glistening with a cold light. As soon as it appeared, it pounced toward the blood dragon that was nearest to it. The blood dragon immediately opened its mouth in retaliation, releasing a pillar of crimson light that struck the green dragon's body with unerring accuracy. However, countless streaks of sword chi immediately erupted out of the green dragon's body to eradicate the crimson pillar of light, leaving the green dragon completely unscathed. Maliang's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, yet before he had a chance to formulate any concrete thoughts, the green dragon and the blood dragon had already clashed. Within the span of no more than 2 breaths, the blood dragon was torn to shreds. However, the remaining 5 blood dragons also took advantage of this opportunity to unleash powerful attacks toward the green dragon in unison. The green dragon remained completely unfazed as countless streaks of lethal sword chi were unleashed out of its scales in retaliation. Right at this moment, the blood dragon that had just been torn apart instantly regenerated before pouncing toward the green dragon again. Even though the sword chi being unleashed by the green dragon was extremely fearsome, it was quickly riddled with wounds from taking on all 6 blood dragons at once, and after tearing another blood dragon apart in a kamikaze attack, it was also destroyed by a flood of crimson light. The remaining blood dragons immediately turned to attack Han Li, who made a hand seal in an expressionless manner, and the azure sword formation before him abruptly vanished. In the next instant, the sword formation appeared directly beneath the blood dragons, and another azure dragon emerged to clash with the blood dragons again. Meanwhile, Han Li remained still on the spot, and even though it looks like he was keeping the 5 blood dragons at bay with ease, he was actually expending a significant portion of his magic power to maintain the sword formation. As he had progressed in his cultivation base, the azure coil sword formation had become immensely powerful, but at the same time, it also expended far more magic power than it had in the past. If a normal Grand Ascension stage being with average magic power and spiritual sense were in Han Li's place, they wouldn't be able to use any additional treasures or abilities while controlling the sword formation. Ma Liang raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, and he suddenly made a hand seal while chanting an incantation. A burst of loud rumbling rang out above Han Li, and a mountainous crimson seal projection appeared amid a flash of crimson light. A burst of law fluctuations surged down from above, and the projection descended toward Han Li. As opposed to being alarmed by this, a faint smile appeared on Han Li's face. As expected, your powers have been severely debilitated. You can't even conjure up the other 4 blood spirit puppet giants anymore. Immediately thereafter, he swept a sleeve through the air to release his 3 extreme mountains, which swelled to over 100,000 feet tall in the blink of an eye at his behest. The trio of mountains clashed with the gargantuan seal projection amid an earth-shattering boom, and they managed to keep the projection at bay, preventing it from descending any further. At the same time, the law fluctuations being released by the crimson seal encompassed the area down below, causing Han Li's magic power to become quite sluggish. However, Han Li remained completely unconcerned as a dark green sword mark appeared on his forearm, and another burst of law fluctuations instantly erupted forth. The 2 bursts of law fluctuations clashed violently before eradicating one another, and thus Han Li's magic power returned to normal circulation. Ma Liang was quite stunned to see this before a furious look appeared on his face. If he were at the height of his powers, an incomplete set of extreme mountains and a profound heavenly treasure would be nowhere near enough to oppose his myriad spirit blood seal. However, in his current severely debilitated state, he simply couldn't unleash much of the seal's power. Just as he was hesitating about whether he should unleash some other type of attack, Han Li made a grabbing motion, and a dark green wooden sword appeared in his grasp. At the same time, the Providence True Devil projection flew forward and vanished into his body in a flash. In the next instant, several balls of light of different colors flew out of his body, each of which contained a different true spirit projection. The projections were giving off vastly contrasting auras that were all extremely fearsome, and they vanished into Han Li's body again in a flash. Piercing purplish golden light immediately radiated from Han Li's body, and he swelled drastically in size as purplish golden scales and silver spirit patterns rapidly appeared over his skin. At the same time he grew 2 extra heads and 4 additional arms, and in the blink of an eye, a gargantuan fiend celestial with 3 heads and 6 arms had appeared. This was none other than Han Li's 3rd Nirvana transformation, and it had a horn on each of its 3 heads. It was clear that he knew that using normal abilities and treasures would be futile against this true immortal, so he was bringing out his trump cards from the get-go. It only took Han Li an instant to complete his transformation, and as he brandished his green wooden sword, a line of silver runes immediately appeared on the surface of the blade. The world's origin chi in the entire area tremored, and countless specks of 5-colored light appeared before flooding toward the wooden sword in a frenzy. Ma Liang's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately swept a sleeve through the air, releasing 8 silver talismans that transformed into giant silver weapons before sending them flying directly toward Han Li. Right at this moment Han Li took a stride forward, then slashed his giant green sword through the air. An extremely long dark green crescent was unleashed by the sword before condensing into a thin dark green line that released a burst of fearsome law fluctuations. The oncoming giant silver weapons stood no chance against the dark green line, and all of them instantly exploded upon contact. The green line was traveling so quickly that it reached Ma Liang almost as if through instantaneous teleportation, and it was releasing a burst of glacial power that made Ma Liang feel as if even his blood had been frozen solid. Ma Liang's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, but instead of taking evasive measures, he swept a sleeve through the air to summon a black shield, while also opening his mouth to release a pristine white sword. The dark green line struck the black shield and only faltered momentarily before slicing the shield cleanly in half, upon which it was met by the small white sword. A dull thump rang out as the two clashed, and strangely enough, they both fell completely still, as if time itself had drawn to a standstill. In the next instant, a crisp crack rang out, and the small white sword shattered without any warning, while the dark green line also faded away. In the instant that the small sword was destroyed, an unnatural flush appeared on Ma Liang's face, and he threw up a mouthful of golden blood essence. "How dare you destroy my origin/immortal sword? I'm going to make sure you suffer the most torturous death possible," Ma Liang said with a furious expression, and it seemed that the white sword had been extremely important to him. Han Li naturally paid no heed to this, and he raised his giant wooden sword before slashing it through the air again. The world's origin chi tremored as another dark green line swept through the air. Ma Liang's expression changed slightly as he swept both sleeves through the air, releasing a flurry of close to 100 treasures of all types of different descriptions. The treasures converged toward the green line before exploding into scintillating balls of light. These treasures were all clearly very formidable, and with each treasure that was detonated, the green line would falter and shorten slightly. Once all of the treasures had been detonated, the green line finally reached Ma Liang, but at this point, it had been reduced to only just over 100 feet in length. One of Ma Liang's fingers turned a crimson-golden color, and he slashed it toward the green line in retaliation. The finger immediately exploded into blood mist, but what little remained of the green line also faded. At this point, Ma Liang was looking rather worse for wear, but he cast a cold gaze toward Han Li and said, "Unleashing these full-power attacks using that profound heavenly treasure requires an immense amount of magic power expenditure. There's no way a mere Grand Ascension stage being like you can unleash more than 2 of those attacks. On top of that, you have to maintain that massive sword formation. You can't have much magic power left." Immediately thereafter, he flipped a hand over to summon a translucent silver flute. "You'll know soon enough whether I can unleash more than 2 of these attacks. Besides, it's not like your situation is much better. You're already a spent force." Han Li chuckled coldly before making a grabbing motion with his other 5 hands, and 5 heavy golden weapons appeared in his grasp. "Haha, don't you worry about me, I have more than enough power left to kill you." Ma Liang chortled in an enraged manner as he brought the flute to his lips. In the next instant, a burst of silver sound waves erupted forth alongside the melodious sound of the flute, and the space in the wake of the silver sound waves was becoming rather blurry and indistinct. As soon as Han Li heard the sound of the flute, he was struck by a sense of drowsiness, following which his surroundings blurred, and in the next instant, he found himself situated within a churning sea of blood. Countless malicious creatures rushed out of the sea of blood, and almost all of them possessed auras at the Grand Ascension stage. You think a mere illusion like this can fool me?" Han Li remained completely unfazed as he lashed out with his 5 golden weapons, sending formidable shockwaves proliferating outward in all directions to instantly eradicate the malicious creatures and sea of blood around him. Even the most profound illusion stood no chance against his almighty attacks. However, a mocking smile appeared on Ma Liang's face upon seeing this, and he continued to play his flute. His body abruptly blurred, and a projection emerged out of his back before vanishing into thin air. At the same time, another flurry of sound waves reached Han Li, and he found himself situated within the illusion he had just eradicated once again. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, but an enlightened look then appeared in his eyes as he immediately lashed out with his golden weapons again to eradicate the illusion a second time. At the same time, the nascent soul within his dantian made a hand seal, and a burst of cool and refreshing energy instantly flowed through his meridians and into his 3 heads. The drowsiness in his mind instantly vanished, and despite the fact that the flute was still being played, no further illusions appeared. Ma Liang was astonished to see this. This silver flute was quite ordinary in appearance, but it was one of his most prized treasures, and as long as the opponent's spiritual sense wasn't more powerful than his own, they would be caught in an endless cycle of illusions with no escape. As such, the fact that Han Li was able to resist the effect of the flute indicated that he possessed superior spiritual sense. Due to the power of this realm, he was severely debilitated, but his spiritual sense was still definitely no less powerful than that of the average immortal. Thus, he had thought that his flute play would be able to put an end to this battle for sure. Before Ma Liang had a chance to consider what ability he could unleash next, Han Li took a stride forward and abruptly vanished on the spot. Ma Liang had a vast wealth of battle experience under his belt, and he immediately reacted, stowing his silver flute away before appearing several hundred feet away in the blink of an eye. In the next instant, 5 thick pillars of golden light struck the spot where Ma Liang had been standing just a moment ago, and the entire space warped violently in the face of the fearsome attacks. Only then did Han Li reappear amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. A hint of astonishment flashed through Ma Liang's eyes upon witnessing the power of those 5 golden weapons. In the face of such devastating attacks, even his true immortal body wouldn't be able to hold up for long, so he immediately abandoned any thoughts of engaging Han Li in melee combat. Just as Han Li had said, despite his immortal powers, he was a spent force, and he simply wasn't able to unleash many of his abilities. Right as he was hesitating about how to proceed, Han Li took a stride forward and vanished into thin air again. Ma Liang's heart jolted slightly upon seeing this, and he also instantly teleported elsewhere. In the next instant, 5 pillars of light struck the spot where he had just been standing, and Han Li reappeared before disappearing in a flash once again. Thus, a chase ensued where Han Li and Ma Liang teleported throughout the area incessantly, while earth-shattering booms rang out with each strike from Han Li. Thus, Ma Liang was constantly being pressured without being afforded any respite. As a result, his fury was reaching a boiling point, and he finally arrived at a decision. After appearing at a certain spot, he didn't immediately teleport away again. Instead, he quickly summoned a jade box before tossing it up into the air, then cast a rapid string of incantation seals toward it. 5 thick pillars of light appeared up above to strike the jade box, and it exploded to release a massive crimson fiery cloud. The fiery cloud then transformed into a crimson WRM with long feelers all over its body, and the 5 heavy golden weapons crashed directly toward it. However, the WRM was able to destroy the 5 oncoming weapons with nothing more than a swipe of its tail, following which it appeared beside Ma Liang in a flash as a ball of red light. The WRM then transformed into a small crimson figure that was around 3 feet tall before chortling with glee. "I didn't think you would undo the second seal on my body. Looks like you're in big trouble here. Otherwise, you would have never done something like this." Right at this moment, Han Li appeared amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, but after he took a glance at the crimson figure he hesitated and didn't attack again. "Cut the chit-chat, Huashuzi. I need you to kill that man for me right now," Ma Liang ordered with a cold expression. "I've already regained my freedom, why should I listen to you?" the crimson figure countered. "Humph, looks like you don't want your bonded bead then," Ma Liang said in a cold voice. "You're willing to return my bonded bead to me? Now that I take a good look at you, you're in a very bad state. No wonder you were willing to release me. However, you have to swear a vow on the name of the Dao Patriarch Jiu Yuan if you want me to assist you here," Huashuzi said. Ma Liang immediately flared up with rage upon hearing this. "How dare you make such a brazen request? If you're unwilling to swear the vow, then I won't help you," Huashuzi replied. "All right, I can swear a vow on the name of our patriarch, but you have to remain by my side for 10,000 more years after we return to the true immortal realm," Ma Liang compromised with a dark expression. 10,000 years? That's not an issue. 10,000 years is nothing more than the blink of an eye for me. I'll take care of this brat for you," Huashuzi chuckled. Ma Liang quickly swore a vow on the name of Dao Patriarch Jiu Yuan, then cautioned, "Don't get careless. You're also restricted by the power of this realm, and your body was damaged in a prior battle, so even though I've undone the second seal, you won't be able to unleash much of your full power. Don't worry, I'm well aware of that. I'm only going to help you keep that brat occupied. You'll have to land the killing blow yourself," Huashuzi said in a nonchalant manner before turning to appraise Han Li in a disinterested manner. What powerful fire attributes spiritual power fluctuations? Are you a fire spirit? Han Li asked. Fire spirit? I suppose you're not wrong in saying that. I didn't think that someone from a lower realm would be able to force Ma Liang to this extent. However, you heard the agreement we just made. I'm obligated to assist him now, Huashuzi replied. In that case, there's nothing more to be said, Han Li chuckled as he raised his 5 golden weapons again before sending them crashing down from above. Huashuzi harumphed coldly as he made a hand seal, and countless fiery clouds erupted out of his body in a frenzy before converging to form that massive crimson WRM again. As soon as the WRM appeared, It reached out with its front claw, and a huge red misty claw that was around an acre in size appeared out of thin air before flying directly toward the 5 oncoming pillars of golden light. An earth-shattering boom rang out, and the 5 golden weapons were stopped cold in their tracks by the giant claw. A surprised look appeared on all 3 of Han Li's face upon seeing this. He was naturally more aware than anyone of just how fearsome those attacks had been given his current incredible strength. Ma Liang's heart eased slightly upon seeing this, and he released several dark blue talismans out of his sleeve before applying them to his own body. Several bursts of blue mist instantly flowed into his body, and his complexion quickly began to improve as he cast his gaze toward Han Li with killing intent flashing in his eyes. Right at this moment, the crimson WRM pounced directly toward Han Li as countless scorching beams of light. 2 of the weapons in Han Li's hands disappeared, and he made a hand seal, upon which a giant golden beetle appeared before him. The beetle then transformed into a shimmering golden shield in front of him, and the scorching beams of light struck the shield like rain falling upon a banana leaf, but they were unable to do anything aside from inflicting a series of shallow indentations upon the surface of the shield. As Han Li was focusing on defending himself, a shadow flew out of thin air like lightning, completely disregarding his protective spiritual light as it hurtled toward the middle head of his 3 heads. Han Li's other 2 heads rotated inwardly, and a 3rd demonic eye appeared on the glabella of each head. A pillar of black light shot out of each demonic eye to strike the shadow with unerring accuracy, and in the instant that the pillars of black light struck the shadow, a house-sized black hole appeared behind Han Li. The black shadow was instantly wrenched into the black hole, and at the same time, Ma Liang suddenly threw his hands onto his own head as he let loose a loud roar with an agonized expression. A derisive look appeared in Han Li's eyes as he cast his gaze toward Ma Liang. It was truly a show of Ma Liang's arrogance that he had dared to attack Han Li directly with a fragment of his soul. That soul fragment hadn't been destroyed by the spatial power unleashed by his demonic eyes, but it had been thrown into a spatial rift, and having left its host, it would dissipate soon enough. With that in mind, Han Li's central head opened its mouth to release a ball of silver flames. The silver fireball then transformed into a small silver fire raven with countless golden runes all over its shimmering silver feathers. Han Li pointed a finger at the fire raven, and it spread its wings as its body instantly swelled to over 1,000 feet in size at his behest. The giant fire raven then let loose a clear cry before swooping down from the heavens. The crimson WRM immediately opened its mouth without any hesitation to release an extremely thick pillar of crimson light that struck the fire raven in a flash. However, the golden runes on the fire raven's feathers flashed, and the crimson pillar of light was drawn into its body, upon which it expanded even further. Those are flames of essence. This is an essence fire raven. Huoshuzi immediately exclaimed upon seeing this, and even a hint of fear had crept into his voice as his prior composure completely disappeared. The silver fire raven didn't allow him any respite as it flapped its wings and reached the crimson WRM before unleashing a wave of scorching silver flames. The crimson WRM let loose a thunderous roar as it transformed into a gigantic ball of crimson flesh with countless feelers thrashing around on its surface, conjuring up a crimson light barrier to protect itself from all directions. The silver flames came into contact with the light barrier, and an impasse immediately ensued as silver and red light intertwined. Han Li nodded to himself upon seeing this, as if he had anticipated this turn of events. This spirit-engulfing fire raven was naturally able to devour all types of spirit flames, and following its last evolution, it had become extremely potent in suppressing fire-attribute spirit beasts, so it was perfect for handling this Huoshuzi. Meanwhile, Ma Liang finally removed his hands from his head, and the pain on face slowly faded as he cast his gaze toward the silver fire raven with a remarkably calm expression. I didn't think that you'd possess flames of essence and law destruction eyes of such a high caliber. It looks like I have no choice but to make a gamble. Go ahead and bring out any other trump cards you have, Han Li harumphed coldly as he lashed out with his golden weapons once again. Ma Liang's body blurred as he vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared, there was a shimmering golden pill in his hand that was giving off a sandalwood aroma with white chi swirling all around it. I never thought the day would come when I would have to take a true soul pill. I'm not going to allow you to die right away, I'm going to put you through all of the most horrendous types of torture. Ma Liang spat through gritted teeth before taking the pill. In the next instant, he let loose an almighty roar, and wisps of white mist surged out of his body to completely inundate him within a huge sea of mist, while the aroma of sandalwood surged through the air. Han Li immediately appeared near the sea of mist amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, then unleashed 5 pillars of light toward it. A dull thump rang out, and the 5 pillars of golden light tremored within the mist as if they had struck something, only to be immediately repelled. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face, and he blew out a breath of air, releasing a burst of fierce wind to disperse the sea of mist. As a result, it was revealed that Ma Liang had been joined by a dark-skinned young man who was completely identical to him in both appearance and attire. One of the young man's arms was twisted into an abnormal state, and he was in the process of withdrawing the arm. It seemed that he had just used that arm to stop the 5 oncoming weapons. The projection was another Provenance True Devil projection, but this one was far smaller than the other one, which had already been incinerated into nothingness by the black devilish flames. That was only an empty shell conjured up by the Provenance True Devil projection, and its demise had drawn Ma Liang into a false sense of security, thereby allowing Han Li to land the killing blow with his profound heavenly treasure. Han Li could sense that Ma Liang's body was harboring an astonishingly powerful nascent soul, but it had been instantly shattered by the power of the profound heavenly spirit/sword and had no chance of resurrection. If Ma Liang had been in the true immortal realm, his nascent soul would have been able to get away even in the wake of his body's destruction. However, his nascent soul had been restricted by the power of the spirit realm, rendering it too slow to escape or to defend itself. In a normal battle, these debilitating effects weren't very apparent, but in a life-and-death scenario, it had proven to be his downfall. An incredulous look appeared on the dark-skinned young man's face upon seeing this. "You actually killed him. Don't you know that he's a direct disciple to the 9 Origin Tao Patriarch? If I didn't kill him, he would kill me. Am I supposed to allow him to do as he pleases just because he has powerful backers? Besides, no matter how powerful this 9 Origin Tao Patriarch is, he's in the true immortal realm, and it's yet to be seen whether I'll even be able to ascend to the true immortal realm," Han Li said in a calm manner. "I don't even recall how many years it's been since I last saw someone with so little disregard for the 9 Origin Taoist temple, and it's a being from a lower realm. Haha, I wonder how the 9 Origin Tao Patriarch would react if he were to hear this." The dark-skinned man chortled with mirth. "You're looking awfully relaxed. Are you not planning to continue this battle?" Han Li asked as he waved a hand to draw a golden storage bracelet from Ma Liang's body into his grasp. "He's already dead, so the contract between us has been rendered null. Why would I continue? Besides, without him, I'm not confident that I can take you down even with that dumb WRM to assist me, so it would be foolish of me to persist. Rest assured, I won't be returning to the true immortal realm anytime soon, and I definitely won't tell anyone about what you did. The 9 Origin Tao Patriarch is constantly in seclusion, and there are people in the Taoist temple adept in divination, but they won't be able to glean anything due to the resistance of the power between realms," the dark-skinned young man replied in a nonchalant manner. "Why should I trust you? I don't know why a heavenly devilish monarch is following a true immortal around, but the best way to make sure you keep a secret is to kill you," Han Li said with a cold smile. The dark-skinned young man heaved an exasperated sigh and proposed, "You're just as paranoid as Ma Liang, I see. How about this? If you don't trust me, then why don't I follow you instead?" Han Li couldn't help but falter slightly upon hearing this. "What do you mean by that?" "I can sign a heavenly devil contract with you, and for a set period of time, I'll act as your shadow and do your bidding to complete some tasks that's beyond even the average immortal. However, you have to offer me some of your blood essence periodically in return. On top of that, if you happen to perish during the term of our contract, your soul and energy will be absorbed by me, so you'll have no chance at reincarnation just like everyone in the 9 Origin Taoist temple," the dark-skinned young man said. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and a burst of black qi emerged out of his back before transforming into a giant ghostly head. The ghostly head then opened its mouth, and a layer of gray qi flew out of Ma Liang's body before forming a ball of energy that was devoured, following which the ghostly head vanished on the spot. The dark-skinned young man then closed his eyes with an entranced expression. As expected of a disciple of the 9 Origin Tao Patriarch, his soul is extremely delicious and can save me tens of thousands of years of arduous cultivation. He then opened his eyes before turning to Han Li with a hint of a smile on his face. "So, how about it? If you agree to let me follow you, I can help you persuade that dumb WRM to become your spirit servant." A serious look appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this, and he was silent for a long while as he appraised the battle between the spirit-engulfing fire raven and the crimson WRM. This was the first time that he had heard of a heavenly devil contract, and he had to consider it carefully before arriving at a decision. At this moment, the crimson seal projection in the sky finally ran out of power without Ma Liang's support and reverted back into a small seal before descending from above. The three extreme mountains also rapidly shrank down before escorting the small seal on its descent, carrying it toward Han Li. In the instant that the giant seal projection disappeared, the 8 blood dragons also vanished in a flash. Thus, the giant golden crab was no longer facing any opposition, and it reverted back into its human form before flying toward Han Li, while the azure coil sword formation disintegrated into countless azure sword projections. Han Li raised a hand to draw the 3 miniature mountains and the crimson seal into his sleeve, following which the azure sword projections reverted back into 72 small azure swords before vanishing into his body in a flash. Dao Xie arrived beside Han Li amid a flash of silver lightning, and Han Li asked, "Dao Xie, do you know of heavenly devil contracts and their effects on heavenly devilish monarchs?" Heavenly devil contracts are a unique type of contract created by the heavenly devilish patriarch, and it's widely regarded one of the 3 most reliable contracts of the true immortal realm. As long the powers of the parties involved in the contract haven't exceeded those of the heavenly devilish patriarch, they won't be able to revoke the contract. However, according to rumors, many of the immortals who have signed heavenly devil contracts with heavenly devilish monarchs have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Dao Xie replied as he took a glance at the dark-skinned young man. It was clear that he had identified what the young man was. Correlation doesn't always equate to causation. All those who dare to sign heavenly devil contracts are bold individuals who are more willing to take risks than others, so there's naturally a greater chance that they perish than the average immortal. None of those rumors have detailed heavenly devilish monarchs revoking a heavenly devil contract. For us, heavenly devil contracts are far more restrictive than they are to other beings, the dark-skinned young man explained. There are indeed no recorded cases of heavenly devil contracts being revoked in the true immortal realm, Dao Xie confirmed in a wooden manner. In that case, this contract does sound reliable. I'll agree to sign the contract. It sounds like you've been in the true immortal realm for quite some time, so you'll be of great use to me if I ever manage to ascend. However, aside from the heavenly devil contract, I have to plant another type of restriction on you to completely erase my doubts, Han Li said after a lengthy pause for contemplation. That's not an issue as long as these terms are stated clearly in the contract. If you can ensure that, then I can even let you plant multiple types of additional restrictions on me, the dark-skinned young man said in a nonchalant manner. All right, then as a start, get that fire spirit to stop resisting first, Han Li said. The dark-skinned young man did as he was told, turning toward the WRM before communicating with it through voice transmission. Soon, all of the feelers on the crimson ball of flesh that the WRM had transformed into shrank back into its body, and it reverted back into its humanoid form. The spirit engulfing fire raven also shrank down to its original size upon seeing this before flying back to Han Li after just a few flashes. Han Li raised a sleeve to release a burst of azure light, and the miniature fire raven was immediately drawn back up his sleeve. You are truly extremely fortunate to have managed to refine an essence fire raven with a hint of spiritual nature in this lower realm, fellow Taoist. Flames of essence are extremely rare even in the true immortal realm. It's no wonder that Huashuzi was unable to unleash even a tenth of his power in the face of such a fearsome opponent, the dark-skinned young man said. Flames of essence? This flame was something that I cultivated unintentionally, and I'm not sure if it's a flame of essence as you say. However, I've always referred to it as spirit engulfing heavenly flames, Han Li replied. Haha, there's no mistaking it, this is definitely a flame of essence. The conditions for the birth of such flames are completely random to begin with. Spirit engulfing heavenly flames is quite an appropriate name, seeing as this flame is adept in devouring other types of spirit flames to bolster itself, the dark-skinned young man said. Right at this moment, Huashuzi appeared nearby amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, then cast his gaze toward Ma Liang's headless body with slightly furrowed brows. So he really did die. Now that he's dead, I don't know when I'll be able to recover my bonded bead. I didn't sense its presence from him, so he's definitely not carrying it. Fellow Taoist Hua, if you want to recover your bonded bead, then you'll have to place your hope in fellow Taoist Han here. He's already managed to attain incredible power in this lower realm. If he manages to ascend to the true immortal realm, he'll be able to help you recover your bonded bead with ease, the dark-skinned young man said with a hint of a smile on his face. Huashuzi's expression immediately darkened slightly upon hearing this. What do you mean by that? Are you saying I should accept him as my master? If you don't do that, how will you return to the true immortal realm? I can just return to the heavenly devil realm, and it won't make any difference to me, but without the nourishment of immortal spiritual qi, your cultivation base will inevitably plummet over time. Besides, your powers are severely restricted here, so if you don't accept fellow Taoist Han as your master, you most likely won't be able to leave this place alive. Don't rely on me to help you, I've already agreed to sign a heavenly devil contract with him. Also, if you're willing to follow fellow Taoist Han, there will be an unexpected benefit. The dark-skinned young man's voice suddenly trailed off as he switched to voice transmission here. Chapter 2435. Soul Badge, is that true? Huishuzi immediately exclaimed upon hearing what the dark-skinned young man had to say, and he turned toward Han Li with a strange look in his eyes. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing this, but he didn't say anything. I've said everything there is to be said, it's up to you whether you believe me or not, the dark-skinned young man replied in a nonchalant manner. Alright, I'll believe you just this once. Fellow Taoist Han, I can become your spirit servant for a period of time, but you must take me with you when you ascend to the true immortal realm. If you can help me recover my bonded bead after your ascension, then I can continue to be your spirit servant for several tens of thousands more years. As for the spirit servant contract, that must be created on the basis of the heavenly devil contract, Huishuzi said. As long as you're also willing to have the same restrictions planted in your body, I have no objections, Han Li replied with a smile. A faint smile appeared on the dark-skinned young man's face upon seeing this, and he wasted no further time as he opened his mouth to expel a ball of inky black qi. The ball of black qi then transformed into a black leather scroll that slowly unfurled itself. I've written the terms of the contract onto the scroll. If neither of you have any objections, then please inscribe your name or insignia onto the contract with your blood essence, and also inject a wisp of your spiritual sense into the scroll. As soon as his voice trailed off, Mo Guang led by example, opening his mouth to expel a ball of blood essence, which transformed into a pair of runes that read Mo Guang before inscribing themselves upon the scroll. Immediately thereafter he made a hand seal, and a streak of crimson light shot out of his glabella before also vanishing into the scroll in a flash. Han Li drew the black scroll toward himself, and after carefully examining the contract several times, he gave a pleased nod. The terms of the contract were very similar to what had been described, and there were even some clauses that were far less binding than he had anticipated. As opposed to the contract, this was more like a mutual treaty, and that made Han Li a lot less apprehensive toward it. Thus, he raised a finger and forced out a drop of blood essence onto the scroll. The drop of blood essence had faint azure light glowing within it, and as soon as it landed on the scroll, it immediately inscribed the words Han Li in ancient golden characters onto the scroll's surface. Han Li then tossed the black scroll toward Huishuzi, who only examined it briefly before also signing the contract in a nonchalant manner. Immediately thereafter, the black scroll vanished into thin air, and thus the heavenly devil contract had been erected. Now everything is finished here, please return with me to the human race. I'm sure I'll benefit immensely from your help in the future, Han Li said. We've signed the contract, so we're naturally obligated to follow you wherever you go, Mo Guang replied. In that case, let's take care of one final thing before we depart, Han Li said with a nod. One final thing? Are you referring to the rat that's been eavesdropping on us this entire time? Huishuzi asked as a cold light flashed through his eyes. As soon as his voice trailed off, a five-colored light projection suddenly emerged on the ground. At the same time, spatial fluctuations erupted beneath Han Li and the others, and a streak of white light appeared before hurtling directly toward the light formation. Mo Guang seemed to have already anticipated this, and he reached out in an unhurried manner, upon which a burst of peculiar power swept over the light formation on the ground, causing it to instantly explode. The streak of white light immediately sprang back before revealing itself to be none other than that second Ming Zun. However, his aura was significantly diminished, and he was appraising Han Li and the others with an extremely grim expression. Han Li was completely unsurprised to see this. Ah, so it's fellow Taoist Ming Zun. Looks like a clone of yours must have perished in your stead during the earlier battle. There's no way a clone would have been able to fool powerful beings of your caliber. That Ming Zun was also me, but it was only a part of me. I didn't think that you would be the sole beneficiary of my painstaking plan, fellow Taoist Han, Ming Zun replied. At this moment he was feeling extremely frustrated. He had detonated the formation earlier in Skies Beyond, and was severely wounded by unforeseen backlash. As such, his arrival was significantly delayed, and he only made it just in time to witness Han Li landing the killing blow on Ma Liang, a turn of events that he was naturally extremely astonished by. However, despite his dire situation, his expression remained calm and collected. I see. You must have used a soul-splitting technique. No wonder I didn't sense anything amiss earlier. Unfortunately for you, the formation's detonation was unable to kill that true immortal or even me. I don't think I can just let things slide, Hanli said in a bone-chilling voice. What would you like me to do? As long as it's within my capabilities, I definitely won't refuse. I only resorted to this plan for the sake of the entire spirit realm. Besides, if it weren't for the detonation of the formation, I don't think you would have been able to slay that true immortal, Mingzun replied with a wry smile, but he was drawing upon his magic power in secret, and had also summoned several treasures that were concealed up his sleeves. Rest assured, Brother Ming, I won't ask for anything unreasonable, all I want is your head. Regardless of how you try to frame the situation, the fact of the matter is that you intended to use me as a sacrifice for this formation. Rest assured, once I kill you here, I'll make sure that your heroic deeds are sung as ballads throughout the entire spirit realm, Hanli said as a mocking look appeared on his face. Mingzun's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, and he immediately swept his sleeves through the air to release around a dozen crimson beads. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal and a pair of thunderstorm wheels appeared beneath his feet, while a pair of snowy white wings that were over 100 feet in length emerged on his back. Lightning flashed from beneath his feet, and he flapped his wings vigorously, instantly fleeing into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he was already over 10,000 feet away, and he was continuing to flee with all his might. Hanli gave a cold harumph upon seeing this, and he was just about to do something when Mo Guang stepped forward and thrust a palm through the air to release a gust of fierce black wind. The dozen or so crimson beads were swept up by the gust of wind and exploded into crimson flames without being able to unleash any of their power. Leave that man to fellow Taoist Hua and myself, Brother Han. We've just signed the Heavenly Devil contract, and this is a good opportunity for us to show you what we're capable of, Mo Guang said with a smile as he withdrew his arm. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this before turning toward Hua Shuzi, who was already raring to go, and he agreed, All right, I'll be counting on you then, fellow Taoists. That man is not to be underestimated, so do be careful. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Han, I can kill that man even on my own, Hua Shuzi chortled as he transformed into his crimson WRM form before setting off in pursuit. Mo Guang also followed along closely behind him as a black line, and in the blink of an eye, both of them had vanished into the distant sky. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he released a small golden beetle out of his sleeve, then instructed, Jin Tong, follow them, but make sure they don't detect your presence. The golden beetle nodded in response before shrinking down to less than a tenth of its original size, then also set off as a faint shadow. Only then did Han Li withdraw his gaze before flipping a hand over to summon a shimmering golden storage bracelet. He then inspected the contents of the storage bracelet with his spiritual sense, and an ecstatic look immediately appeared on his face. A burst of spiritual light flashed before him, and 3 treasures appeared, comprised of a small dark green vial, a silver gourd, and a jade badge that was looking rather worse for wear. Han Li swept his spiritual sense over these items before drawing the silver gourd into his grasp before removing the lid, then tipped out a pair of shimmering golden pills. I didn't think that he would have spare True Soul pills in addition to the one that he took. The True Soul pill that I found on that young deer's body had to have been from him as well, Han Li murmured to himself with undisguised excitement in his eyes. However, he then immediately stowed the 2 pills and the silver gourd away before reaching out to grab the small green vial. After a brief inspection, the vial was also stowed away, following which Han Li cast his gaze toward the jade badge, which had several crimson cracks on its surface. This soul badge definitely doesn't belong to the true immortal I just killed. Otherwise, it would have already completely shattered. Who could it belong to, and why did he carry it down into the spirit realm? Could it be that the owner of this soul badge is currently in the spirit realm? Han Li murmured to himself with his brows furrowed in befuddlement. It won't be a difficult task to find out, fellow Taoist Han. All you need to do is unleash a certain secret technique onto the badge, and you'll be able to know whether its owner is in this realm, Taoist Xie suddenly said. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and he nodded in response before stowing the jade badge away. There were naturally more items in the golden storage bracelet, including 7 or 8 treasures that he didn't know the function of, as well as a stack of golden and silver talismans and a large pile of golden crystals. However, he currently wasn't in his own cave abode, so he couldn't bring them out for closer inspection. Thus, Hanli continued to wait, and a short while later, spatial fluctuations erupted nearby, following Jin Tong shot out of thin air as a streak of golden light before vanishing up Han Li's sleeve in a flash. Immediately thereafter, Jin Tong delivered a report to him through voice transmission, and his expression immediately eased upon hearing what it had to say. Not long after that, a black line and a ball of crimson light appeared in the distance before reaching Han Li after just a few flashes to reveal Mo Guang and Huashuzi. Seeing as you've returned so quickly, I presume you've succeeded, fellow Taoists? Han Li asked with a faint smile. Hee, of course. That man had some tricks up his sleeve, but he was never going to be able to escape from us. Huashuzi chuckled as he tossed 2 items toward Han Li. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of invisible force that held the items steady in midair before him. As it turned out, one of the 2 items was a shriveled-up body of a nascent soul, while the other was a black storage bracelet. I've devoured all of the nascent soul's essence, so he won't even be able to go into the cycle of reincarnation. As for everything else he left behind, we have no use for them, so you can have them, Mo Guang said in an unhurried manner. Han Li cast his gaze toward the shriveled nascent soul, and even though its face was severely distorted, it was clearly identical to that of Ming Zun. Thank you for your hard work, fellow Taoists. I suggest we leave this place right away. As soon as his voice trailed off, he drew the black storage bracelet into his own grasp before stowing it away, flicked a ball of crimson flames toward the shriveled nascent soul to instantly incinerate it into nothingness. Mo Guang and Huashuzi naturally had no objections, and thus Han Li raised a hand to release an ordinary-looking azure flying carriage, which all 3 of them immediately got onto. Dao Xie made a hand seal and vanished up Han Li's sleeve as an arc of silver lightning, following which the carriage flew away as a ball of azure light. 3 days later, some of the powerful beings of the Helian Trade Guild stationed on the outskirts of Baleful Cry Point finally ventured into the area in a wary manner. The entire landscape had been completely transformed, but of course, not a single living being was found. Ming Zun hadn't arranged for anyone to enter Baleful Cry Point aside from the Grand Ascension Stage beings and the people required to set up the formation. As such, these people had no idea whether Ma Liang was still alive or not and didn't dare to linger in Baleful Cry Point for too long. Thus, after only a brief examination of the area, they immediately scattered to deliver reports to all of the major powers on the continent. Several months later, news of everyone's demise in Baleful Cry Point was released by their respective races, as evidenced by the fact that their soul badges had all shattered. This news spread like wildfire throughout the entire Tianyuan continent, and even some races on the other continents were soon made aware of this. However, there wasn't any evidence to indicate whether that true immortal had also perished during the battle. As a result, the entire spirit realm was under a cloud of constant fear and apprehension, and no one knew if the true immortal would return someday to continue in his brazen killing spree. Only after an entire year had passed was news of the true immortal's demise released by the insignificant human race. It was also stated that the manager of the trade guild, Ming Zun, had intentionally sacrificed some of the powerful beings in the bipolar annihilation formation to enhance the power of the formation's detonation, and that he had perished alongside the true immortal. This piece of news was only half true, and it created a massive stir in the entire spirit realm. All of the major powers in the realm immediately launched investigations to find that there was indeed a human survivor from the battle at Baleful Cry Point. After this was verified, many of the Grand Ascension Stage beings of major races abandoned their cultivation and immediately traveled to the human race. Some of them wanted to ascertain what had happened during the battle at Baleful Cry Point, but the majority of them were far more interested in the treasures left behind by the true immortal. All of the other powerful beings aside from Han Li had perished, so there was no doubt that he had obtained all of the true immortal's treasures. All of the races on the Tianyuan continent were more subdued, not because they weren't interested in those treasures, but because all of their most powerful beings had perished, so they knew that they wouldn't be able to do anything to Han Li. As such, they decided to lie low and observe for now. In contrast, many Grand Ascension Stage beings from the other 2 continents were flocking toward the Tianyuan continent. During the next year or so, many foreign Grand Ascension Stage beings had arrived at the human race and easily found the boundless sea where Han Li was residing. However, regardless of what intentions these Grand Ascension Stage beings harbored, all of them were forced into retreat by Jin Tong and Dao Xie as soon as they entered the boundless sea. Many of the foreign races who were keeping tabs on the situation were quite stunned by this turn of events. In a short span of time, over 20 foreign Grand Ascension Stage beings had visited the boundless sea in succession, but all of them returned empty-handed. Thus, all of the other Grand Ascension stage beings became more cautious, and the rest of the people who dared to venture into the boundless sea were all truly formidable beings even among Grand Ascension cultivators. Even so, they were still easily dismissed by Jin Tong and Daoist Xie, and throughout this entire period of time, Han Li didn't show himself even once. This made many Grand Ascension stage beings quite wary of Han Li, but also enraged the powerful beings who stood at the very pinnacle of the other two continents. On this day, 8 vastly renowned powerful beings from the Blood Sky continent and Thunder continent arrived at the Boundless Sea together. On this occasion, Daoist Xie and Jin Tong made no effort to stop them, and they arrived directly at Origin Integration Island. All of a sudden, an extremely formidable aura erupted out of the Azure Origin Palace at the center of the island, and Han Li emerged with Mo Guang, Washuzi, Daoist Xie, and Jin Tong. The 8 powerful beings were stunned by the auras being released by Han Li's group, and their confrontational demeanor immediately softened significantly. They weren't exactly fearful of Han Li and the others, but they knew that Han Li definitely wasn't going to be someone that they could walk over as they pleased. Han Li welcomed the 8 powerful beings into the Azure Origin Palace with a smile, following which the gate swung shut, and an azure light barrier descended from the heavens to encompass the entire palace beneath it. After that, Han Li and the others remained in the palace for 3 days and 3 nights. During this time, loud commotions and bursts of formidable energy fluctuations would occasionally erupt within the palace, causing the azure light barrier to tremor violently. However, after the 3 days passed by, the azure light barrier suddenly faded, following which the 8 powerful beings emerged with dark expressions, and all of their auras had been diminished to different extents. Han Li emerged from the palace behind everyone else with a faint smile on his face, and he seemed to have been completely unaffected. Fellow Taoists, I've already sold you a true soul pill, it's up to you what you decide to do with it. I hope that this puts an end to this matter. If anyone else tries to harass me or my brethren from now on, they won't be met with such an amicable reception. Old Man Copper Crow, whom Han Li had met on one past occasion in the Elder Devil realm, was one of the 8 powerful beings, and he replied with a wry smile, "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Han, all of us are important figures in the spirit realm, and we certainly won't go back on our word. Once we go back, we'll do our best to dissuade others from visiting you." After that, the 8 of them rose up into the air and quickly flew away from Origin Integration Island. Only after the 8 streaks of light had vanished into the distant sky did Han Li's expression ease slightly, and he turned to Jin Tong and Daoist Xie and said, "If anyone else dares to force their way into the boundless sea, then there's no need to hold back any longer. If you can capture them, then do so, but if not, then just kill them. Brother Mo Guang, fellow Daoist Hua, as a safety precaution, I'll get you 2 to patrol the area as well for the near future." "Haha, leave it to us, we won't let anyone else into the boundless sea," Mo Guang replied. Washuzi and the others didn't have any objections either. Thus, all 4 of them left after being dismissed by Han Li. Sure enough, no one else came to the boundless sea thereafter, and some of the Grand Ascension stage beings who were lingering nearby also disappeared following the departure of the 8 powerful beings. Not long after that, a rumor about Han Li defeating 8 of the most powerful beings in the entire spirit realm on his own began to spread, and countless races in the spirit realm were astonished to hear this. After hearing about how Han Li had already sold a true soul pill to the 8 powerful beings, everyone else abandoned any intention of visiting him. In the wake of all of this, it became widely accepted that Han Li was the most powerful being on the Tianyuan continent, and there were even some who proclaimed that it wasn't an exaggeration to say that Han Li was the #1 Grand Ascension stage being in the entire spirit realm. Chapter 2437, Meeting the Spirit Monarch. Chapter again 2 years later, Han Li was seated in a corner of a secret chamber on the deepest level of the Azure Origin Palace, flicking a string of incantation seals of different colors through the air. At the center of the secret chamber was a golden formation that was around 10 feet in size, above which hovered 2 green vials of different sizes, one of which was situated above the other. The vial on top was only several inches in size, and it was tipped upside down with a mysterious light flashing within its opening. All of the incantation seals being released by Han Li were vanishing into that vial in a flash. The vial below the first vial was around a foot in size, and it was being bound by countless 5-colored threads of light surging out of all parts of the light formation. Furthermore, wisps of light were flowing out of the opening of this vial, only to be drawn in by the vial above it. With each wisp of light that was drawn away, the larger vial would become slightly smaller, and its color would also fade minutely. Around half a day later, the 2 vials were identical in size, and the second vial had become almost transparent. Finally, a dull thump rang out, and the second vial transformed into a ball of light that was also drawn into the first vial up above. An elated look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he immediately pointed a finger at the formation. The buzzing formation instantly ceased operating, and all of the light faded as the only remaining small vials slowly descended. Han Li waved a hand to draw the vial toward him, and the vial immediately flew into his grasp as a ball of green light. The Origin Fusion Immortal technique on that jade slip really is very effective. It was worth spending the time to master it. Now that I've fused the replica vial with the heaven-controlling vial, I'll be able to use the treasure in simple ways rather than solely relying on it to nurture spirit medicines, Han Li murmured to himself with a faint smile on his face. Come to think of it, I always knew that this was an extraordinary treasure, but I never thought that it would be something held in such high regard by even a Tao patriarch of the true immortal realm. How did it end up in the human world? And where has its vile spirit gone? Could it have been lost elsewhere in the human world? Han Li mused as he stowed the small vial away. So be it, it's already a miraculous opportunity that I've managed to obtain a part of this treasure, and it's played an extremely important role in my cultivation. It would be greedy of me to ask for more than this. What I have to do now is go into seclusion to master the new abilities that I've obtained. After I do that, I'll refine the integrated 5 extreme mountains and some of my other important treasures, then go into arduous cultivation in anticipation for my ascension tribulation. However, before I go into an extended period of seclusion, there are some things that I must take care of. With that in mind, Han Li flipped a hand over to summon a rather damaged jade badge. This was the soul badge that he had obtained from Ma Liang, and not long after he had returned to the Boundless Sea, he had asked Daoist Xie to ascertain whether the owner of this soul badge was actually in the spirit realm. Much to his surprise, not only did Daoist Xie ascertain that the owner of the soul badge was indeed in this realm, they were situated in the spirit race territory not far away from the human race. The thought of the spirit monarch immediately sprang into Han Li's mind upon learning this. He didn't know who the owner of this soul badge was, but it most likely had something to do with the mysterious spirit monarch. He was planning to head to the spirit race to investigate, but in the aftermath of the battle in Baleful Cry Point, he had to remain in the Azure Origin Palace this entire time, thereby resulting in this delay. No more foreign beings have come to see me in the past 2 years, so it's about time I take care of this matter, Han Li murmured to himself as his eyes narrowed slightly. Several months later, violent spatial fluctuations erupted above concealed spirit mountain of the spirit race, and a giant black arc emerged in complete silence, following which Han Li appeared at the front of the arc. Everyone on concealed spirit mountain naturally erupted into a frenzy, and countless guards rose up into the air as layers of restrictions appeared. However, Han Li paid no heed to this as he called out, "Fellow Taoist spirit monarch, I have come to visit you and would like to be granted an audience." Even though his voice wasn't very loud, it was echoing throughout the entirety of concealed spirit mountain, and it was imbued with some type of incredible power, causing all of the guards in the air above the mountain to immediately plummet out of the heavens. Even the holy spirits who had risen up into the air were forced to descend again as their magic power ceased to circulate as soon as they heard this voice. Everyone was naturally very alarmed by this, and right at this moment, the spirit monarch's voice finally rang out from within concealed spirit mountain. "Welcome, fellow Taoist Han, forgive me for not greeting you sooner. Please come in." As soon as the voice trailed off, the restrictions above concealed spirit mountain parted to open up a passageway to grant Han Li passage. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this, and he flew into the passageway as a streak of azure light. The spirit monarch was standing on the platform in front of the hall on the summit of concealed spirit mountain, looking up into the sky with a solemn expression. All of a sudden, Han Li appeared before him in a wraith-like manner amid a flash of azure light. The spirit monarch's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing this, but a smile appeared on his face as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Your powers are truly unfathomable, fellow Taoist, and you've become renowned throughout the entire spirit realm. To what do I owe this honor of a visit from you? You're far too kind, brother spirit monarch. I was very fortunate to have earned this reputation. Besides, it's not necessarily a good thing. As for why I came here, I wanted to ask you about something," Han Li replied. The spirit monarch's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "What is it, fellow Taoist Han? Do you know the owner of this item, fellow Taoist?" Han Li asked as he swept a sleeve through the air to release that damaged soul badge. The spirit monarch drew the soul badge into his grasp, and his expression immediately changed slightly as he sensed its aura. After a long pause, A wry smile appeared on the spirit monarch's face and he asked, "Did you obtain this badge from that fallen immortal, Brother Han?" Han Li nodded in response. "Looks like I was right to have come to visit you." After a brief hesitation, the spirit monarch seemed to have arrived at some type of decision, and he tossed the soul badge back to Han Li. "Please come with me, fellow Taoist." Immediately thereafter, he turned and strode toward the hall without waiting for a response from Han Li. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he immediately followed along. Shortly thereafter, Han Li found himself standing in front of an ice mountain in a mysterious underground space, appraising a handsome young man sealed at the bottom of the mountain with a surprised expression. The spirit monarch was standing beside him, and the former made a hand seal before casting an incantation seal into the ice mountain. Moments later, countless specks of white light quickly converged within the ice mountain to form the nascent soul of the spirit monarch. The nascent soul cast its gaze toward Han Li, and as opposed to being surprised to see him, a wry smile appeared on its face. "So you came after all. It seems that the recently fallen immortal really was searching for the immortal that I've sealed away here. This immortal has resided in the spirit realm for many years, and he's definitely harboring some important secret, so it's no surprise that someone was sent from the true immortal realm to track him down. You managed to seal this immortal, Brother Spirit? In that case, it looks like the rumors circulating about you aren't completely unreasonable after all," Han Li said with a contemplative expression. "I'm afraid I can't elaborate on that in detail," the nascent soul said with a shake of its head, then shot forth toward the spirit monarch as a ball of white light, vanishing into his body in a flash. As a result, the spirit monarch's aura instantly became significantly more powerful, making it comparable to that of the top-tier powerful beings that Han Li had met in the past. It seemed that this was the true spirit monarch. A peculiar light flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, but he didn't say anything. Meanwhile, the spirit monarch withdrew his aura before turning to Han Li with a serious expression. "Now that you've seen the owner of this soul badge, what are your intentions, fellow Taoist Han? Regardless of whether this immortal has anything to do with the one I've slain, I want to put an end to him to avoid any potential trouble in the future," Han Li replied. "I'm afraid you most likely won't be able to do that, fellow Taoist Han. If it were that easy to put an end to this true immortal, then I wouldn't have sealed him here to slowly refine his true immortal body with my bonded flame," the spirit monarch replied with a shake of his head. Han Li was rather surprised to hear this. "Why is that? It wasn't that difficult for me to slay that other true immortal." "That's completely different. The true immortal that you slew was restricted by the power of laws of the spirit realm, and he had to dedicate most of his power to contend with the power of this realm. In contrast, this true immortal has already changed to a different true immortal body in the spirit realm, and he's cultivated some type of immortal secret technique that has combined his magic power, soul, and physical body into one unified entity. As such, his body is far more powerful than that of even the average true immortal, and even a profound heavenly treasure wouldn't be able to harm him," the spirit monarch explained. "I see. However, I would still like to give it a try. However, prior to that, I want to try using a soul search technique on this true immortal. I'm sure you wouldn't have any objections, right, Brother Spirit?" Han Li asked as he stroked his own chin in a contemplative manner. The spirit monarch faltered slightly upon hearing this before he replied, "If you're capable of killing this swine right away, then I would be more than happy to see that. However, unless your spiritual sense is far more powerful than his, there's no way you'll be able to successfully search his soul." Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Oh, then what if I insist on giving it a try?" The spirit monarch's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. A cold look then appeared on his face as he said, "If you're that confident, then I won't stop you. However, I sealed this immortal. If you insist on doing things by force, then you'll have to prove yourself to me first." "How would you like me to do that?" Han Li asked. "There are many people proclaiming you to be the #1 Grand Ascension stage being in the spirit realm. I dare say I'm also quite powerful among Grand Ascension stage beings. If you can withstand 3 attacks from me without evading, then I can allow you to do whatever you want to this immortal," the spirit monarch said. "Haha, that suits me just fine. Among cultivators like ourselves, power should be revered above all else. If I can't withstand 3 attacks from you, then I'll leave right away and won't make any mention of this again," Han Li said. "In that case, let's go somewhere else so we don't damage the seal here," the spirit monarch proposed. "As you wish," Han Li replied with a nod. Thus, the spirit monarch flew out of the hall as a streak of light, followed closely by Han Li. Around 15 minutes later, Two violent tremors erupted from a certain point within the belly of concealed Spirit Mountain, causing the entire mountain to tremor and quake. All of the Spirit Race guards couldn't help but exchange alarmed glances upon sensing this. They knew that this had to have something to do with Han Li, but they had no idea exactly what was happening, and they didn't dare to investigate without permission from the Spirit Monarch. Within a hall in the belly of concealed Spirit Mountain, a light barrier that enshrouded the entire hall suddenly disintegrated into specks of white light. Han Li and the Spirit Monarch were facing one another from opposite ends of the hall with vastly contrasting expressions. Han Li had his hands clasped behind his back with a nonchalant expression, looking as if he were taking a stroll through the park. In contrast, the Spirit Monarch's aura had become even more powerful than before, and there was a silver Buddha projection behind him with demonic eyes all over its body, but his expression was quite strained. There was a circle of short translucent blades all around him, but they seemed to have intentionally avoided him. Between the two of them was a giant blade that was over 100 feet in length, and it was suspended in mid-air, but its tip had gone missing. Furthermore, the cross-section of the incision was as smooth as a mirror, as if the tip had been sliced off cleanly by something. "You've already made 2 attacks, there's still 1 attack left," Han Li said in an unhurried manner. "Forget it. Your powers are even more fearsome than the rumors suggest. I would only be heaping more embarrassment upon myself if I were to go unleash a final attack," the Spirit Monarch said with a wry smile. He then made a hand seal, and the giant black blade immediately vanished alongside the silver Buddha projection and the short translucent blades. "Hee hee, you're far too modest, Brother Spirit. I'm sure you didn't unleash your most powerful attacks. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have been able to withstand them so easily," Han Li chuckled. "I do indeed have several trump cards up my sleeve, but it's clear that you haven't unleashed your true power either. In any case, I concede wholeheartedly, and you can do as you please with the true immortal that I've sealed. However, I have one condition. If you can kill that true immortal, then you must do it while I'm present. Otherwise, I won't be able to rest assured," the Spirit Monarch said with a serious expression. "That's not an issue. I recently refined a new treasure that could come in useful here," Han Li replied in a meaningful voice. The Spirit Monarch was rather puzzled to hear this, but he was ecstatic that Han Li had agreed to his condition and immediately led Han Li back toward the hall. Half a month later, the restrictions above concealed Spirit Mountain parted, and a streak of azure light flew out before landing on the giant black arc that was waiting in the sky above. Moments later, a burst of rumbling rang out, and the arc flew away into the distance. Han Li was seated in a secret chamber on the bottom level of the arc, appraising a small green vial in his hand with a contemplative expression. Several days ago, he had successfully searched the soul of that sealed immortal with his immense spiritual sense. Actually, it wouldn't be accurate to refer to it as a complete success. Even though he had successfully infiltrated the immortal's mind, he discovered that most of the immortal's important memories had been sealed by some type of mysterious energy. After inspecting all of the accessible memories, Han Li directed his spiritual sense toward that part of the immortal's memories, only for the immortal's head to instantly explode like a watermelon. As a result, the immortal's spiritual sense was instantly destroyed, and even his body was reduced to ashes by this burst of mysterious energy. Han Li and the Spirit Monarch were naturally both astonished by this outcome. Even so, through the memories that Han Li had managed to glean, he was able to figure out what this small vial was, as well as how it was related to Ma Liang and the 9 Origin Taoist Temple. Furthermore, he had received a piece of very important information, which was that the vile spirit could be present in the Elder Devil realm. He was unable to find out why the immortal had betrayed the 9 Origin Taoist Temple, nor how he had managed to obtain the heaven-controlling vial, but he did discover the reason behind why the heaven-controlling vial had been split up into 2 parts that had fallen into different lower realms. As it turned out, the immortal had expended a massive price to obtain a great teleportation talisman to escape to another immortal region in order to flee from the 9 Origin Taoist Temple. However, during the teleportation, the talisman was affected by some type of mysterious power. As a result, not only did his teleportation fail, he was forced to descend into a lower realm. During this process, the heaven-controlling vial that he had only just barely managed to seal suddenly began to struggle with all its might. He immediately attempted to restrain it using a variety of secret techniques, but it was already too late. The vile spirit unleashed some type of innate ability to split up into 2, and each of its constituent parts fell into a different realm. Thankfully, the immortal had the presence of mind to unleash a tracking technique on the vile spirit from afar. As long as the tracking mark wasn't erased, he would always be able to track down the vile spirit in the future. Once he managed to do that, he would be able to make use of the vile spirit's ability to sense its vessel, and it would be very much possible for him to recover the entire heaven-controlling vial. Unfortunately for him, he was severely wounded by the power of the spirit realm while descending into the realm, and not only was his physical body almost completely destroyed, his powers were severely debilitated as well. As such, he could only sink to the seabed and slowly reforge a true immortal body while also gradually recovering his powers. During this time he had unleashed the same tracking technique on multiple occasions, thereby allowing him to ascertain that the vile spirit was situated in the Elder Devil realm. Furthermore, a clone of his had traveled throughout most of the spirit realm to find spirit medicines that were useful to him, and he had even entered the vast glacial realm through the Thunder Continent on one occasion. The silver lotus seed pod that Hanli had obtained from that realm was extremely useful for manifesting a true immortal body, but it still wasn't ready to be picked at the time, and the other spirit medicines there were of no use to the immortal, so he had left them all there. Never did he imagine that Hanli would infiltrate that area countless years later and plunder all of the spirit medicines in that area. That unexpected turn of events had the immortal livid with rage. As such, he had rushed out of seclusion as soon as he had reforged an immortal body, and at the time he still hadn't completely recovered his powers. He then immediately tried to track down Hanli, only to be sealed by the spirit monarch before he was even able to get to Hanli. With that in mind, Hanli couldn't help but marvel at the unpredictable nature of fate and fortune. He gently shook the small green vial in his hand, and a faint sloshing sound rang out. The liquid in the vial wasn't its usual spirit liquid. Instead, it was a drop of blood essence that he had extracted from the sealed true immortal's body with immense difficulty. With this drop of spirit blood, he would be able to unleash the same tracking technique, thereby allowing him to track down the vile spirit in the Elder Devil realm. A hint of irrepressible excitement welled up in Hanli's heart at the thought of the incredible abilities that the complete heaven-controlling vial could possess. It looks like I'll have to make a trip to the Elder Devil realm right away. Right at this moment, a faint dragon's roar rang out from his body. Hanli faltered slightly upon hearing this before hurriedly stowing the small vial away, then released a shimmering silver scale out of his sleeve. A series of silver runes appeared on the surface of the scale, quickly forming a short message. In 2 years, the vast Spirit Tao Fruit Convention will commence on True Dragon Island. A peculiar look appeared in Hanli's eyes upon seeing this message. I'm sure many powerful beings from other realms will be attending this convention. Looks like it should definitely be worth attending. Also, that vast Spirit Tao fruit can be consumed to temporarily attain a vast Spirit Tao physique, which will be extremely beneficial to the abilities I'm cultivating, so I have to obtain one. It's time for that Tian Fair to redeem her promise. 2 years should be enough for me to make a trip to the Elder Devil realm. I'll speak to Wanner before I go so she doesn't get worried, Hanli murmured to himself. After that, he stowed the silver scale away before summoning an azure mirror. He tossed the mirror forward before swiping a finger quickly through the air several times, and a string of white text vanished into the mirror in a flash, following which he proceeded to wait in silence. Shortly thereafter, lines of white text began to appear on the surface of the mirror, and Hanli only took a quick glance at the message before a faint smile appeared on his face. Nangong Wan hadn't tried to dissuade him from going, but her concern for him was made very apparent through her message. Hanli swept a sleeve through the air, and the mirror vanished amid a flash of azure light, following which the giant black arc sped onward at several times its original speed. 2 months later, a dark green sword projection suddenly flashed through the murky gray sky over a barren region of the Elder Devil realm, and a white spatial rift appeared. Hanli then slowly emerged from the spatial rift with a green wooden sword in his hand, and he inspected his surroundings, upon which his brows furrowed slightly. This was a very unfamiliar place that he had never been to before. He was able to enter the Elder Devil realm smoothly as he had found a fragile point between the Spirit realm and the Elder Devil realm, which he was able to exploit using his profound heavenly spirit/sword and his immense magic power. Mo Jianli had once also entered the Elder Devil realm through a fragile point like he did, but for Mo Jianli, it had been far more difficult, and he had risked his life during that trip. In any case, Hanli had ventured into the Elder Devil realm to find the vile spirit, so he didn't care where he was in the Elder Devil realm. After ascertaining that there were no devilish beings nearby, he opened his mouth to expel a ball of azure light, within which was a small azure vial that was several inches tall. Hanli flicked a string of incantation seals toward the vial, and it immediately began to swell drastically in size, reaching around 10 feet tall in the blink of an eye. At this size, the dark green spirit patterns on the vial's surface had become as thick as human fingers, and were extremely clear and prominent. Immediately thereafter, Hanli swept a sleeve through the air to release over 100 formation flags, all of which shot forth in different directions before vanishing into thin air. Hanli then switched to a different hand seal, and countless runes of different colors surged out of the surrounding space, quickly forming a massive light formation with the giant vial at its very center. After that, Hanli began to chant an incantation, and he drifted into the air above the huge vial before taking a seat with his legs crossed. The giant vial and the light formation then began to fluctuate erratically in brightness at Hanli's behest, and all of a sudden, a pillar of dark green light erupted into the heavens out of the opening of the vial, then vanished in the blink of an eye. At the same time, a burst of peculiar energy fluctuations proliferated outward in all directions from the vial. Meanwhile, Hanli slowly closed his eyes, and continued to chant his incantation. Within a certain mysterious space in the Elder Devil realm, there was a pond that was filled with silver liquid. All of a sudden, several of the stone slabs at the bottom of the pond began to glow brightly, and a massive light formation appeared. Several mysterious runes converged at the center of the light formation, and a dark hole appeared. In the next instant, a pillar of dark green light erupted out of the hole, and the pillar of light erupted out of the pond before vanishing at the very top of this mysterious space. Hanli's eyes abruptly sprang open as an ecstatic look appeared on his face. The vile spirit really is in the Elder Devil realm. Looks like I'm in luck, Hanli said with an excited expression as he withdrew his hand seal. He then quickly made a series of grabbing motions, and the giant light formation beneath him reverted back into formation flags before flying up his sleeve. Meanwhile, the giant vial shrunk down into a small ball of dark green light before vanishing into his body. Immediately thereafter, Hanli flew away as a long streak of azure light, vanishing into the distant sky after just a few flashes. Once every few days, Hanli would unleash the tracking technique again to ensure that he was on the right track. Along the way he encountered some devilish beings and cities, but he merely flew directly past them without bothering to stop. With his current powers, there was most likely no one in the entire Elder Devil realm who could keep up with him at his full speed. It was often the case that the devilish beings he passed by would only hear something flying through the air, but couldn't even see Hanli. As such, they could only look around in bewilderment before continuing on their way. Half a year later, Hanli was standing at the foot of a giant tree on the summit of a tall black mountain with his hands clasped behind his back, and he was looking on at a black sea in the distance with a contemplative expression. So the vile spirit is residing in the devilish origin sea? I guess there's only one way to find out. It's not like anyone can stop me anyway, so if worst comes to worst, I'll just have to force my way in. Having arrived at a decision, Hanli made a hand seal, and spatial fluctuations erupted in the air above the black mountain, following which the ink spirit holy ark emerged. He hadn't used this ark previously during his travels as it was far too conspicuous, but there was barely anyone residing in the devilish origin sea, so he could use the ark without any qualms. At the same time, Dao Xie appeared behind Hanli amid a flash of silver lightning. Brother Xie, I'm sure you're far more familiar with the devilish origin sea than me, so I'll be counting on you. I'll do my best, Dao Xie replied in an indifferent manner. Thus, Hanli swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which swept up both of them before carrying them onto the giant ark. The puppets on the ark immediately sprang into action at Hanli's behest, and a black light barrier appeared over the surface of the black ark before it forged on ahead. Countless bolts of lightning came crashing down from the heavens, but the black light barrier remained as resolute as ever, and the ark quickly vanished into the mist up ahead. Close to a month later, the giant black ark was hovering in midair above a huge green island. The giant light formation and the massive vial had been summoned once again, and they were flashing incessantly while Hanli stood at the front of the ark, unleashing the same tracking technique once again. Just as a thick pillar of light was about to erupt out of the opening of the vial, a cold voice suddenly rang out from deep within the island. Who dares to encroach upon the Bitter Spirit Island? As soon as the voice trailed off, a massive three-headed black WRM emerged from the island amid a thunderous roar. On the central head of the black WRM stood none other than one of the three devilish patriarchs, Yuan Yen. Hanli? When did you enter our holy realm? A wary look immediately appeared on his face at the sight of Hanli. Am I not allowed to come here? Hanli countered in an indifferent manner as he continued to unleash the tracking technique. Humph, why have you come all the way here to the Bitter Spirit Island again? You've already progressed to the Grand Ascension stage, so the spirit cleansing pond won't benefit you in any way, Yuan Yen said with a dark expression as he glanced at Dao Xie, then directed his attention toward the light formation and giant vial. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Yuan, I no longer have any interest in the spirit cleansing pond. I'm here to search for something else and I'll leave as soon as I find it, Han Li replied. What are you looking for? That's not for you to worry about, brother Yuan, Han Li replied. Immediately thereafter, he flicked an incantation seal into the light formation down below, and a pillar of dark green light erupted into the heavens from the opening of the vial. Yuan Yan's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, but after a brief hesitation, he decided not to try and stop Han Li. Even though news of Han Li slaying the true immortal hadn't spread to the Elder Devil realm yet, he had become extremely wary of Han Li ever since Han Li had killed the Stemborer Queen. Furthermore, devilish qi was very sparse on the Bitter Spirit Island, so it would be unwise for Yuan Yan to engage Han Li in battle here. Of course, the presence of Dao Xie also contributed to this decision. Thus, after a brief moment of contemplation, he decided to remain on the spot and watch what Han Li was doing. As expected, the vile spirit is here. Han Li quickly arrived at a conclusion before stowing the vial and formation flags away, then flew away with Dao Xie as two streaks of light. Yuan Yin immediately followed them without any hesitation. At their speed, the three of them reached the center of the giant island in the blink of an eye, and an ordinary-looking mountain appeared up ahead. All of a sudden, a pillar of white light erupted into the heavens from the mountain, following which the scenery up ahead shattered like a mirror to reveal two lush green mountains and a valley that was filled with abundant spiritual qi. The pillar of white light was originating from none other than that valley. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this pillar of light. During his last visit, this pillar of light had only appeared after the restrictions had been broken. Why was it appearing prematurely from the Bitter Spirit Valley now? Just as Han Li was contemplating the potential reasons behind this, a ball of azure light suddenly flew out of his sleeve before hurtling directly toward the pillar of light in the distance as a blurry shadow. Han Li's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he immediately made a grabbing motion, releasing a burst of enormous invisible power to immobilize the ball of azure light several thousand feet away. The azure light faded to reveal the azure vial, and at this moment, it had become semi-transparent with countless dark green runes on its surface. Furthermore, it was tremoring violently, attempting to break free with all its might. At the same time, a sharp ringing sound erupted from within the pillar of white light, and a ball of yellow light shot forth toward Han Li like a shooting star. Han Li's heart jolted upon seeing this, and he immediately made a grabbing motion with his other hand as well. Spatial fluctuations erupted above the ball of yellow light, and a giant golden hand appeared before grabbing toward the ball of light like lightning. All of a sudden, countless azure threads erupted out of the ball of yellow light, and the giant golden hand was instantly riddled with holes before disintegrating into specks of spiritual light. The ball of yellow light continued onward, covering a distance of several kilometers in the blink of an eye before appearing directly beside the small azure vial. The yellow light then faded to reveal a small yellow vial that was completely identical in size and appearance to the azure vial. As soon as the yellow vial appeared, it immediately rushed toward the small azure vial, as if it were attempting to fuse as one with it. However, a layer of dark green light suddenly appeared over the surface of the small azure vial, and the yellow vial was repelled, tumbling back several tens of feet before steadying itself again. Two specks of yellow light flashed from the vial, and a pair of possessed black eyes appeared on its surface, displaying a stunned expression. Immediately thereafter, the yellow vial rushed toward the azure vial again, but regardless of what angle it approached the azure vial from, it was invariably kept at bay by the layer of dark green light. A hint of urgency appeared in its small black eyes upon seeing this. Meanwhile, Han Li was making a hand seal in the distance, and he heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this. Having fused the heaven-controlling vial with its replica, Maoliang's replica, he was now able to control the vial to keep the vile spirit at bay. This was most likely why Maoliang had been given the replica treasure by the 9 Origin Dao Patriarch in the first place. With that in mind, Han Li slowly drifted toward the two vials while Yuan Yen looked on with an astonished expression. The 3 devilish patriarchs had guarded this Bitter Spirit Island in shifts for tens of thousands of years, but they had no idea that such a treasure existed on the island. It was clear that the yellow vial possessed a high level of spiritual nature, and it was most likely no less valuable than the average profound heavenly treasure. As for why Han Li knew of the existence of this treasure, that clearly had something to do with the azure vial in his possession. With that in mind, Yuan Yin was struck by the involuntary urge to follow Han Li forward. However, right at this moment, a loud thunderclap rang out nearby, and Dao Xie appeared before him with a cold expression amid a flash of silver lightning. Yuan Yan's heart jolted slightly upon seeing this, and he faltered in his tracks. He cast a hesitant gaze toward Han Li, then looked back at Dao Xie, and he was struggling to decide whether he should try and force his way through or not. He hadn't faced Han Li in battle since the latter had progressed to the Grand Ascension stage, but even back when Han Li was only a body integration cultivator, he was already able to ensure self-preservation against Yuan Yan. As such, he had to be far more powerful than the average Grand Ascension stage being, and he was accompanied by this formidable foe immortal puppet as well. Yuan Yan had always been a proud individual, but he knew that there was no way that he could defeat Han Li's duo and obtain the treasure. If he were to try and intervene, not only would his attempt inevitably end in failure, he would run the risk of making a sworn enemy out of Han Li. Thus, after some careful contemplation, he could only heave a resigned internal sigh and look on at Han Li from afar. Unbeknownst to him, he was missing out on the biggest opportunity of his life, and that the treasure up ahead was something that even a Tao patriarch of the true immortal realm held in extremely high regard. If he had known the origins of the heaven-controlling vial, there was no way that he wouldn't intervene, even if he knew that failure would be the most likely outcome. Meanwhile, Han Li was carefully approaching the pair of small vials with a cautious expression. Even though the yellow vial was only a vial spirit with no substantial form, it had managed to easily destroy the giant golden hand that Han Li had conjured up earlier, so Han Li knew that it was not to be underestimated. After rushing toward the small azure vial over 10 more times to no avail, the yellow vial finally ceased in its futile actions and cast its gaze toward Han Li with a hint of confusion and wariness in its eyes. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief upon seeing this. The vial wasn't attacking him or fleeing right away, and that made things a lot easier for him. With that in mind, he swept a sleeve through the air, and a golden talisman abruptly exploded within his sleeve. A plume of dense azure mist was instantly released, inundating the entire surrounding area with a radius of around half a kilometer. Thus, Han Li and the two small vials were completely concealed within the mist, and even Yuan Yan's spiritual sense was kept at bay. Yuan Yan's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he knew that he had made the right decision not to intervene. Setting aside everything else, this spiritual sense restriction alone would be enough to pose a huge headache to Yuan Yan. Time slowly passed, and no sound or movement arose within the sea of azure mist. Yuan Yan's brows furrowed tightly upon seeing this, and he couldn't just allow Han Li to remain on the island alone, so he sat down onto the head of his giant black WRM to meditate. 7 days and 7 nights passed by, and just as Yuan Yan's patience was beginning to run out, the sea of azure mist churned, following which a streak of azure light shot out from within. Han Li then appeared before Yuan Yan with an ecstatic expression and said, "I'm surprised you're still here, fellow Taoist. Sorry to keep you waiting. I couldn't just leave a foreign cultivator like you alone in the devilish origin sea. You've obtained the treasures you came here for, right? Hurry up and leave," Yuan Yan said in a cold voice as he rose to his feet. "I had no intention of staying any longer anyway." I wonder when we'll meet again," Han Li replied. After that, he didn't waste any more time and departed with Dao Xie, while Yuan Yan looked on with a cold expression. Within a secret chamber in the giant black ark, Han Li was appraising a small green vial in his hand with a pleased smile. After a long while, he stowed the vial away before closing his eyes to meditate. As for how he had managed to tame the vile spirit during those 7 days and 7 nights, that was never revealed to anyone, even countless years into the future, by which time Han Li had reached the very pinnacle of the true immortal realm. As such, many of his friends and disciples were left guessing with no way of finding out the truth. Several months later, the Black Ark was hovering in midair above a bottomless canyon, and Han Li and the Dao Xie were outside the Ark, standing side by side as they looked down from above. Through this spatial node, we'll be able to reach the Moh realm, which is closest to the True Dragon Island. All Fan Potsy told me was that envoys of the True Dragon Island would come to meet me, but he didn't give me an exact location, Han Li murmured to himself with a wry smile before making a hand seal, and the Ink Spirit Holy Ark quickly shrank down before flying up his sleeve. After that, he made a grabbing motion, and a dark green wooden sword appeared in his grasp before being slashed downward. A dark green sword projection swept forth, and an earth-shattering boom rang out deep within the canyon, following which a white spatial rift appeared amid a burst of violent spatial fluctuations. Han Li made a hand seal, and the black arc shrank down into a ball of black light before vanishing into his body, following which he and Daoist Xie flew into the spatial rift down below. Immediately thereafter, the rift slowly sealed itself and everything returned to normal. Moments later, spatial fluctuations erupted in the air above the spot where the black arc had just been situated, and a huge golden lotus flower appeared, atop which stood a man and a woman. These two were none other than the devilish patriarchs, Nye Pan and Bao Hua, and the former had a rather sickly appearance. Looks like he really did only come to our holy realm for that treasure that Yuan Yen told us about. However, that spatial rift doesn't seem to lead back to the spirit realm. It should take him to the Mo realm instead. That realm is far more powerful than our holy realm. I wonder why he's going there? Nye Pan mused in a slightly raspy voice. That doesn't really matter as long as he doesn't linger in our holy realm. Otherwise, with such an unfathomably powerful being around, there's no way we'd be able to focus on our cultivation, Bao Hua replied. That's true. Speaking of which, I wonder if the news we received from the spirit realm is correct. That man has clearly only recently reached the Grand Ascension stage, yet he was able to kill a true immortal. Granted, that true immortal was restricted by the power of the realm, but this is still an incredible feat, Nye Pan said with a serious expression. I'm sure there wouldn't be any mistake surrounding such an important piece of information. I heard that he was only able to kill that immortal after he had been severely wounded by many other powerful beings of the spirit realm, Bao Hua replied. Even so, it's still a testament to his power. The more powerful someone is, the more life-saving trump cards they'll have up their sleeves. A true immortal would definitely possess trump cards that are unimaginable to us, yet he was still slain in the end. On top of that, I heard that Han Li had obtained some true soul pills from that immortal. If it weren't for the fact that true soul pills are useless to devilish beings like ourselves, I would be tempted to bring him down at all costs, Nye Pan mused. Of course. If those were true devil pills in his possession instead, then there's no way we would have allowed him to leave our holy realm so easily. Come to think of it, you're not far away from your ascension tribulation, right? How much of a chance do you think you'll have of succeeding? Bao Hua asked. With the power of my holy nirvana physique, perhaps I would have had a 10% to 20% chance of success had I not been severely wounded in that battle against the Stemborer Queen. Even though I've fully recovered from my injuries, too much of my essential power has been expended, so my chances have dwindled to next to zero, Nye Pan sighed in a forlorn manner. Don't be so pessimistic, brother Nye Pan. Your holy nirvana physique is one of the top 3 body refinement methods across all realms, so it's not impossible that it could help you transcend your ascension tribulation. By the way, Han Li seems to have cultivated the holy nirvana physique as well. His holy nirvana physique is slightly different from yours, but there's no mistaking the fact that it's the same cultivation art. I wonder how he managed to attain this physique, Bao Hua said with a befuddled look in her eyes. The holy nirvana physique stems from the most basic devilish arts, and devilish cultivation arts are prevalent throughout all realms, so it's no surprise that someone else was able to find a way to attain the physique. However, it's virtually impossible to actually attain the physique from a practical perspective. I was only able to succeed due to a string of many opportunities. If I had to do it all again, I'm not confident that I would be able to. As such, it truly is astonishing that someone from a foreign race was able to master the physique to such an advanced level, Nye Pan replied with a wry smile. I was just as astonished as you were when I saw him unleash the holy nirvana physique for the first time. It seems that he really is a man of immense fortune. Alright, that's enough about him. When we go back, I'm planning to go into seclusion to try and ascend to the true devil realm as soon as possible, Bao Hua said with a serious expression. Alright, we'll let Yuan Yen take care of everything during our seclusion. Among the two of us, I think you have better chances of ascension. You suffered a major ordeal, but you've emerged on the other side even more powerful than you had been in the past, and you've even attained a spirit domain, which I'm sure will increase your chances of success, Nye Pan said with a hint of envy in his voice. Hehe, I certainly hope so. I'll be taking my leave now, brother Nye Pan, Bao Hua chuckled in response, and the lotus flower gently ejected Nye Pan at her behest before its petals quickly closed, and it flew away as a golden projection. Nye Pan heaved a faint sigh before departing toward another direction as a streak of golden light, and thus, peace and quiet returned to the canyon. A month later, Han El was seated beside a tall maple on a small hill, and Taoist Shui suddenly asked, Fellow Taoist Han, did you already notice the 2 devilish Grand Ascension stage beings that had been following us? Han Li was rather taken aback by this question. As a faux immortal puppet, Daoist Xie possessed a certain level of spiritual nature, but he very rarely initiated conversations. Of course I did, and one of them is an acquaintance whom I've interacted with on multiple past occasions. However, they didn't get in my way, so there was no need for me to acknowledge them. I see, Daoist Xie replied with a nod before falling silent again. A contemplative look appeared in Han Li's eyes upon seeing this, and he said, "If I recall correctly, Ma Liang referred to you as an immortal puppet, rather than a faux immortal puppet, is that correct? Have you been hiding some things from me?" "I'm not sure if what he said was accurate, and I've never hidden anything from you," Daoist Xie replied in an expressionless manner. "I find that very hard to believe," Han Li said as his brows furrowed slightly. "There is a restriction planted on my body, and I'm only able to access a part of my memories. Only after you gather all of the materials I requested will I be able to access all of my memories and give you more information," Daoist Xie explained. "Alright, you've been a great ally of mine for a long time, so I'll believe you, but please tell me the truth once I gather all of the materials," Han Li said. Daoist Xie nodded in response before falling still again. Han Li cast his gaze toward the distance, then suddenly flipped a hand over to summon a silver scale. A message that was different from the previous one appeared on the surface of the scale, and Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he read the message. "So the envoy of the True Dragon Island will meet me in this realm within a week of activating the scale. Why didn't they make this clear from the very beginning instead of separating the message into sections? Come to think of it, it's about time that the envoy arrived," Han Li murmured to himself. Right at this moment, a pleasant voice suddenly rang out nearby. "That's because our True Dragon race has sent out close to half of all of its members to welcome the guests that are attending the Dao Fruit Convention." Immediately thereafter, spatial fluctuations erupted overhead, and a green five-clawed dragon appeared before transforming into a fair-skinned green-robed woman with a short horn on her head. Han Li faltered slightly at the sight of the woman. "Fairy Tian, could it be that you're the envoy assigned to meet me? Are you disappointed to see me here, Brother Han?" Tian Fair asked with a faint smile. "Hee, of course not, it's just that you had told me that you're one of the overseers of the Dao Fruit Convention, so I didn't think that you would be greeting guests in person," Han Li replied as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Us overseers are just glorified attendants. Our True Dragon race has always had a very small population, so all of the overseers have overlapping envoy duties as well," Tian Fair replied as she pursed her lips. Immediately thereafter, she made her way over to Han Li before appraising him with an intrigued expression. "What is it, Fairy Tian? Are you suspicious that I'm an imposter?" Han Li asked with a perplexed expression. "No, it's just that your powers don't seem to have increased by much, so I'm wondering how you were able to kill that true immortal. By the way, many powerful beings have already been made aware that you may possess true soul pills, so some of them may target you for that reason," Tian Fair replied with a smile. "I didn't think that news of this would spread so quickly. Unfortunately for them, I've already taken one of the true soul pills and sold the rest to several other grand ascension stage beings of our spirit realm," Han Li chuckled in response. "You may be able to fool the average cultivator with such an alibi, but I'm not sure it'll work on the powerful beings attending the convention," Tian Fair said with a hint of a smile. "It's up to them whether they believe me or not. If some of them dare to try and target me, then I'll make sure they're taught a good lesson," Han Li replied with a nonchalant smile. Tian Fair's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, but her smile then immediately returned as she said, "Hee, it looks like you're already well equipped to deal with the situation. By the way, Elder Jean of our True Dragon race has heard about the True Soul pills, and he would like to meet you in private." Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "Elder Jean? Are you referring to the Golden Dragon Grand Elder who's renowned to be the most powerful being of your race? There's no need to be concerned, fellow Daoist. The Dao Fruit Convention has always been a good opportunity for powerful beings to exchange treasures. Elder Jean is very interested in the True Soul pills, but he's not going to force a transaction. If you don't want to trade your remaining True Soul pills, then you don't have to," Tian Fair said. "That's very generous of Elder Jean. Unfortunately, these True Soul pills are extremely important for my Ascension Tribulation, so even if I have some in reserve, I have no intention of trading them," Han Li said with a shake of his head. Tian Fair seemed to have already anticipated this response and she said, "Don't be so quick to refuse, Brother Han. Elder Jean asked me to tell you that what he's offering for exchange is even more valuable than True Soul pills when it comes to Ascension Tribulations. As you know, Us true dragons are different from normal living beings, and we're not that interested in ascending to the true immortal realm. As such, some extremely precious items to other powerful beings are next to useless for us. In that case, I'm certainly open to hearing what Elder Jean has to offer. How about this? I'll make a decision about whether I want to visit Elder Jean once I arrive on the True Dragon Island, Hanli decided after some hesitation. I'm sure you won't regret agreeing to meet with Elder Jean, Brother Han. Also, if the trade takes place, word will spread that you've offloaded your true soul pills to our true dragon race, and no other powerful beings will harass you then, Tian Fair said with a smile. Hee, that does sound like an appealing arrangement, Hanli chuckled. Having said all that needed to be said about the true soul pills, Tian Fair changed the subject. Alright, it's about time that we set off. The True Dragon Island isn't far away from the Mo realm, but it'll take quite some time to get there. Hanli naturally had no objections to this and immediately nodded in agreement. Thus, Tian Fair waved a hand upward, a white flying carriage drawn by several red beasts flew out of an ordinary-looking cloud at her behest. The carriage was over 100 feet in length, and it was as pristine white as jade with all types of beautiful patterns engraved on its surface. The 4 beasts drawing the carriage were horse-dragon hybrid creatures with dragon horns on their heads and glowing crimson scales all over their bodies. These are Draco horses that are unique to our True Dragon Island. They're not exceptional in battle, but they're extremely strong and possess astonishing stamina, able to run for several months straight without sustenance without any dip in performance, Tian Fair introduced. That's very interesting. I've seen some so-called dragon horses in the past, but they can't even begin to compare with these Draco horses. Are these creatures sold on your island by any chance? Hanli asked in an intrigued manner. Of course these low-grade spirit beasts are sold on our island. However, due to some special reasons, these spirit beasts can only maintain their unique desirable qualities on our True Dragon Island. Outside of the island, their bloodline will become thinner and thinner, and in the end, they'll become no different from dragon horses, Tian Fair replied. That's quite a pity, Hanli said as a hint of disappointment appeared in his eyes. If these Draco horses could be bred on a large scale, then they would definitely be able to significantly benefit the human race. There's no need to be too dejected, Brother Han. There are far better things on our True Dragon Island than these Draco horses, and I'm sure you'll find other things appealing to you, Tian Fair chuckled before flying up toward the carriage in the sky. In that case, it sounds like it'll be worth the trip even if I don't obtain a vast spirit Dao fruit, Hanli said as he also flew up toward the carriage. Moments later, the 4 Draco horses galloped into the distance with the flying carriage in tow. The carriage was traveling in an extremely stable manner, as if it were on flat land, and Hanli was quite surprised by this as he looked down at this ordinary-looking carriage. Tian Fair immediately noticed his intrigued expression, and she smiled as she explained, "This wind spirit carriage is constructed from a type of spirit copper that's also unique to our True Dragon Island. Not only is this material over 100 times lighter than normal spirit metals, wind attribute spiritual power can be injected into it, so it's quite a remarkable material. I really am looking forward to getting to the True Dragon Island now," Hanli replied with a smile. "In that case, why don't we get there sooner?" Tian Fair said as she made a hand seal before casting a string of incantation seals into the bodies of the 4 Draco horses. As a result, bright red light radiated from the Draco horses, and they swelled drastically in size as thick fangs appeared in their mouths, while their eyes took on a crimson-golden color. Following their transformation, the speed of the 4 beasts increased by over 2-fold, and they flew through the air as a long streak of red light with the flying carriage behind them. Several months later, Hanli emerged from a giant hall suspended in a boundless starry sky alongside Tian Fair and arrived on a plaza outside. There was a giant green moon up above that concealed virtually the entire sky. Actually, it was more accurate to refer to this as a gargantuan semi-spherical island that was entirely enshrouded under a green light barrier, and there were some buildings that were visible on the island. "So this is the True Dragon Island. It's about the same as what I expected," Hanli murmured to himself. Our True Dragon Island wasn't always like this. What you see here is a product of the tireless efforts of many generations of our forefathers. Alright, seeing as your invitation token has already been examined, you'll be able to roam the island as you please during the Dao Fruit Convention, but make sure to stay away from the restricted areas I outlined earlier. I have some overseer duties that I need to attend to, so this is where we'll part ways, Tian Fair said. "Thank you for bringing me all the way here, Fairy Tian. Go ahead and do whatever it is you need to do," Hanli replied with a nod. Instead of immediately departing, A hint of a smile appeared on Tian Feier's face and she asked, "Before I leave, isn't there anything you want to say to me?" "Is there something I'm supposed to say to you?" Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. Looks like I'll have to raise the matter myself then. I made a promise to you in the past and I'm delivering on it now. As for whether you'll be able to obtain the vast spirit Dao fruit, that'll be up to you," Tian Feier said with a roll of her eyes, then released a white jade slip out of her sleeve. Han Li's eyes lit up as he drew the jade slip into his own grasp, and a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Hee hee, you have my thanks, Fairy Tian. Alright, the favor I owe you has been repaid, I'll be taking my leave now." Tian Feier extended a parting salute before departing. Following her departure, Han Li stowed the jade slip away before heading toward a white teleportation formation situated on a corner of the plaza. The formation was completely unattended, but as soon as Han Li strode into it, a stone plaque that was around 10 feet tall emerged from the ground with an ovular indentation on its surface. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air, and a streak of silver light shot forth before fitting into the indentation in a flash. That was none other than the silver scale given to him by Fan Paraozi. As soon as the object entered the indentation, a burst of energy fluctuations erupted forth, and the teleportation formation shuddered as it began to release wisps of white light amid a faint buzzing sound. Han Li raised a hand to draw the silver scale back up his sleeve, and only then did countless runes surge out of the teleportation formation, following which he abruptly vanished on the spot. Around a month later, a collection of scaled beings with horns on their heads were walking along the streets of an ordinary-looking small town. There were also some other beings with extremely powerful auras in the town, and all of them had disguised their appearances through various as they visited the shops on the main street in the eastern part of the town. What? 10 tones of wind essence metal? Inside a dimly lit shop, a middle-aged shopkeeper with a short purple horn on his head was staring at the customer before him with an astonished expression. Recently there had been a sharp spike in the number of large sales being made in his shop, but he was still stunned by such a massive order. The customer standing in front of the shopkeeper was enshrouded within a layer of azure light that completely concealed his appearance, and he said, "Do you not have that much stock? I've heard that the shops on the True Dragon Island are renowned for their ability to supply wind essence metal. Surely this isn't too much to ask. If you had come around half a month earlier, we would have been able to satisfy your order, but at the moment, we only have around 4 tons of stock. All of the rest have been purchased by several other seniors half a month ago," the shopkeeper replied in a respectful manner. It was clear that all of the people making such large orders were powerful beings from outside the True Dragon Island, and he was only a mid-grade being with some True Dragon bloodline in his body, so he naturally didn't dare to display any disrespect toward these esteemed customers. "Alright, I'll take the 4 tons you have left then," the customer said after a brief hesitation, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a storage bracelet. The shopkeeper caught the bracelet before quickly examining its contents, then immediately replied, "Please wait for a moment while I get someone to bring the materials to us." Immediately thereafter, he pulled out a disc and spoke briefly into it. A short while later, a small hidden formation in a room behind the shop flashed, and a young dragon emerged. He quickly made his way into the shop, then pulled out 3 identical azure storage bracelets that he handed to the shopkeeper. "Please examine to see if that's the right amount," the shopkeeper said as he offered the storage bracelets to the customer with both hands. "There's no need for that, I trust in the reputation of your race," the customer said as he accepted the 3 storage bracelets, then immediately departed without examining their contents, leaving the 2 dragons to stare at one another in the shop. "I can't believe he didn't even bother to examine such a large quantity of wind essence metal," the young dragon said. "You don't know anything. That man was granted entry to the island, so he must be somehow related to the esteemed true dragons on the island. Besides, a powerful being of his caliber doesn't have to worry about being swindled by a shop like ours. Otherwise, he can report us to the overseers on the island, and we'll be in a world of trouble," the shopkeeper said with a roll of his eyes. An enlightened look appeared on the young dragon's face upon hearing this. Meanwhile, a streak of azure light descended on a mountain outside the small town, then faded to reveal none other than Han Li. He brought out the 3 storage bracelets again and briefly examined their contents, upon which a pleased look appeared on his face, and he flew away toward another direction. 3 months later, a streak of azure light descended into an ordinary-looking valley in a crimson mountain range. At the center of the valley was an open platform, atop which sat 5 men and women in different attire, consisting of a little girl who appeared to only be around 7 or 8 years of age, a green-skinned elderly man, a couple who seemed to be in their 30s, and an imposing man with countless silver patterns etched all over his body. The streak of azure light landed right at the center of the platform, and Han Li appeared before taking a glance at the other people present, then sat down with his legs crossed not far away from the little girl. The others weren't surprised by Han Li's arrival, and all of them continued to sit in silence. A short while later, another streak of five-colored light shot forth from the distance, then arrived in the air above the valley to reveal a beautiful woman in a colorful dress. The woman descended onto the platform and inspected her surroundings with a cold expression before taking a seat in an unoccupied corner. The green-skinned elderly man rose to his feet upon seeing this and said, "There are enough people present, let's begin the exchanges. If no one has any objections, then I'll go first." "Go ahead, fellow Taoist, the sequence doesn't matter in exchanges like this." No one had any objections, so the elderly swept a sleeve through the air, and a rectangular stone table that was of a glowing white color emerged at the center of the platform at his behest. Immediately thereafter, he flipped a hand over, and around a dozen treasures appeared on the table amid a flash of spiritual light. Han Li immediately focused his gaze on the treasures to find that several of them were stored in jade and wooden boxes, while the rest were all extremely rare treasures in the spirit realm, and there were a few that he couldn't even recognize. "I'm looking for myriad year-in marrow, Shenyuan wood, 9 spirit emerald, and of course if you have any incomplete profound heavenly treasures, I would be very much interested as well," the elderly man said as he pointed a finger at the wooden and jade boxes, upon which their lids were removed one after another. Everyone else quickly examined the items on the table, but no one was quick to say anything. After waiting for a while, an impatient look appeared on the elderly man's face and he said, "Is no one interested in the items I've brought out? In that case I'll stow them away and let the next fellow Taoist present their treasures." "Hold on, fellow Taoist. I have a piece of Shenyuan wood here. Take a look and see if it's to your liking," the little girl said in an extremely tender voice, then raised a hand to release a black object. An elated look appeared on the elderly man's face as he drew the item into his own grasp, but after a brief inspection, a hint of disappointment appeared on his face. "This piece of Shenyuan wood is a little small and not quite old enough. What would you like in exchange for it?" the elderly man asked after a brief moment of contemplation. "I would like a high zenith pill in exchange," the little girl replied as she pointed at one of the jade boxes on the table. "All right, a high zenith pills is roughly equivalent in value, so I can agree to that," the elderly man replied without any hesitation. Thus, a golden pill rose up out of the jade box at the little girl's behest before flying into her grasp. She then stowed the pill away and sat back down. After that, the man from the middle-aged couple said, "I'm interested in that jade slip. Would you be willing to exchange it for a vial of contaminant-in liquid that's similar to myriad year-in marrow?" The elderly man considered this for a moment before nodding in response. After that, a series of exchanges took place, and most of the items on the table were successfully traded. Han Li had also exchanged for a material that was neither metallic nor stone in nature. After ensuring that no one else wanted to make further exchanges, the elderly man stowed away the remaining items on the table with a pleased expression. "Who would like to go next?" someone asked. "If it's all right with everyone else, I'll go next," Han Li said as he rose to his feet with a faint smile. 4 months later, close to 100 golden armored guards were patrolling the area near a giant golden ark above a huge lake. Within a lavish hall on the top floor of the ark, Han Li and a golden-robed elderly man were seated across from one another. Behind the elderly man was none other than Fan Paozi, the man who had invited Han Li to the True Dragon Island in the first place. The golden-robed man had a pair of purple horns that were similar to Fan Paozi's, and he gave off an imposing air of authority. "So you insist on seeing what I have to offer before you decide whether you want to trade your true soul pill?" "That's right, Elder Jean. During these past few months, I've traveled across most of the True Dragon Island and exchanged for many precious materials from other fellow Taoists. However, I haven't seen anything that can compare with a true soul pill. As such, I'm very interested to see what you can offer," Han Li replied in a calm manner. This golden-robed man was none other than Grand Elder Jean of the True Dragon race. Rather than being displeased by this request, Elder Jean merely smiled and said, "Hee, that's very much understandable. In reality, this true soul pill isn't very useful to our True Dragon race. I'm preparing to give it to an old friend of mine to repay a favor that I owe him. As for what I'm offering in exchange, I'm sure you'll be pleased to see it. Fan Paozi, bring out what I've prepared." A faint smile appeared on Fan Paozi's face as he released a palm-sized red jade box out of his sleeve with a golden talisman adhered to it, covering most of the box. The jade box was sent flying toward Han Li, who drew it into his own grasp before pointing a finger at it, upon which the talisman and lid of the box flew off on their own, revealing 7 scales of different colors, all of which were giving off astonishing spiritual pressure. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. "Go ahead and take a closer look, fellow Taoist Han," Fan Paozi said in a nonchalant manner. Han Li was a little suspicious, but he wasn't worried that the 2 true dragons would plot against him, so he drew a light blue scale out of the box and into his grasp. As soon as his fingers came into contact with the scale, his expression changed slightly as if he had sensed something, and he quickly pressed the scale against his own forehead before closing his eyes. Time slowly passed by, and a series of expressions appeared on Han Li's face one after another, including astonishment, awe, and even a hint of fear at the end. Only after a full 15 minutes had passed by did Han Li remove the scale from his forehead and reopen his eyes. "I'm sure you've identified what these scales are by now, fellow Taoist Han. They're completely useless to the average person, but their value is immeasurable for someone aiming to ascend. After all, it's not every day that you get the opportunity to experience someone else's ascension tribulation," Elder Jean said in a calm manner. "That's certainly true, but there should be some differences in the ascension tribulations between true dragons and beings from other races," Han Li said. "There are slight differences, but it's largely similar. Also, no one would be willing to have others in close proximity during their ascension tribulation, so it's almost impossible to witness such a tribulation. This ability to record experiences into scales is an innate ability unique to our true dragon race, and it's not something that can be replicated by anyone else. These scales contain experiences of both successful and failed tribulations, and there are even some from true dragons who perished during their tribulations. I'm sure their importance to you would be no lesser than that of the true soul pill," Elder Jean said with a confident stroke of his own beard. "That may be true, but I'm assuming these are disposable items that can't be replicated. Otherwise, you wouldn't be offering them to me so easily," Han Li said. "Hee as expected of someone who's slain a true immortal. Indeed, each of these scales can only be used thrice, and after 3 uses they'll be destroyed. As for replication, I'm the only one in our entire race who knows the replication technique. Otherwise, I certainly wouldn't be offering these scales to you," Elder Jean replied. "If each scale can only be used thrice, then they're a lot less practical, and they won't be enough to exchange for a true soul pill," Han Li said in a calm manner. "In that case, how about I throw in a vial of myriad-year golden mulberry sap as well? This sap is a necessary ingredient to refine several types of legendary pills, and there aren't many vials of this liquid even on the entire True Dragon Island," Elder Jean proposed. "All right, in that case I'm willing to go ahead with the exchange," Han Li quickly decided upon hearing this. The True Soul pill could drastically enhance the power and stability of his soul, but practically speaking, it wasn't as useful to him as the tribulation experiences recorded within the dragon's scales. Furthermore, they could be used multiple times so they could benefit those close to him as well, making them far more useful than a true soul pill. Of course, he wouldn't have made this decision so easily if it weren't for the fact that he still had 2 true soul pills in his possession. Elder Jean was rather surprised by how quickly Han Li had agreed to the exchange, and he faltered slightly before an elated look appeared on his face. "You're a straightforward man, fellow Taoist Han. No wonder Fan Paozi decided to give you an invitation on just your first meeting. I'm sure you'll benefit immensely during this Tao Fruit Convention." He flipped a hand over as he spoke, summoning a small golden vial that he tossed directly toward Han Li. Han Li caught the vial before removing its lid and inspecting its contents with his spiritual sense, then nodded as he stowed it away. Immediately thereafter, he flipped a hand over to summon a palm-sized wooden box, which flew directly toward Elder Jean. Elder Jean raised a hand to stop the wooden box in its tracks, and the lid was removed on its own to reveal a golden pill. He then took a whiff of the pill and a pleased look appeared on his face. "Haha, this is definitely a true soul pill. With this, I'll be able to repay the favor I owe that good friend of mine." After that, Han Li conversed with Elder Jean for a short while longer before taking his leave, and he was accompanied by Fan Paozi. "I knew from the first time I met you that you were no ordinary Grand Ascension stage being, but I didn't think you'd forge such a resounding reputation for yourself in such a short time, fellow Taoist Han. Not only did you kill that stem-borer queen, you've even slain a true immortal now. It's a pity that I wasn't there for either of those battles," Fan Paozi said in a joking manner. I was only able to accomplish those feats through immense luck and with extensive external assistance. If I had been on my own, there was no way I would have been able to defeat those formidable foes. By the way, I must thank you for inviting me to this Dao Fruit convention. It looks like I owe you quite a big favor, Hanli said with a faint smile. Haha, don't mention it. I knew that we would get along well, so I gave you an invitation. Otherwise, there was no way I would have done so, Fan Paozi replied in a nonchalant manner. In any case, attending this convention has benefited me immensely. Even if I don't manage to obtain the Dao Fruit, it would have been well worth this trip, Hanli said with a serious expression. I'm sure you must be quite confident in your ability to obtain a Dao Fruit, fellow Taoist Han. Many powerful beings from all realms were invited to attend this convention, but not many can compare with your power. Also, I heard that Tian Fair owes you a favor, and she's one of the convention's overseers, so. Fan Paozi's voice trailed off here as a meaningful look appeared in his eyes. Ahem, you think far too highly of me, brother Fan. Like you said, there are many powerful beings attending this convention. I certainly wouldn't dare to say that I'll be able to obtain a Dao Fruit for sure. As for Fairy Tian, we've only met on 2 past occasions, Hanli replied in an ambiguous manner. Fan Paozi offered no response to this, but he was clearly unconvinced. He then quickly moved on to other topics of conversation that he was interested in, namely Han Li's battles against the Stemborer Queen and Ma Liang. There wasn't too much to hide about those battles, so Han Li answered all of Fan Paozi's questions. Around an hour later, Fan Paozi returned to the Golden Ark alone, while Han Li was already nowhere to be seen. Half a month later, Han Li pressed a white jade slip against his own forehead as he sat in an extremely secluded cave, and one piece of information after another was flashing through his mind. True Lord Feng Yu reached the Grand Ascension stage 50,000 years ago, proficient in the 5 mountain profound arts. Tian Kezi reached the Grand Ascension stage 30,000 years ago, specializes in 36 types of poison arts, making him lethal in close proximity. Layman Ban Rua reached the Grand Ascension stage 60,000 years ago, has attained full mastery of the Azura Vajra physique and once slew 3 Grand Ascension stage devilish cultivators in a single day. 3 months later, the Dao Fruit Convention officially commenced. After a grand opening ceremony, a massive space that was enshrouded under a restriction unique to the true dragon race was opened up, and the battle for the Dao Fruits began. Within a dense forest, Han Li was slowly flying along around 3 feet above the ground. All of a sudden, several of the nearby trees transformed into fearsome giants that were several thousand feet tall, and they raised their arms in unison, sending a vast expanse of green lightning crashing down from above. At the same time, countless green fist projections were unleashed, threatening to pulverize this entire space. However, Han Li was unsurprised to see this, and a cold smile appeared on his face as he stomped a foot down onto the ground below. Countless streaks of azure sword chi immediately erupted upward, slicing through the oncoming lightning and fist projections, following which a massive fiend celestial with 3 heads and 6 arms burst out of the forest, then released a halo of golden light with its 6 palms to instantly eradicate the rest of the fist projections. A faint cry of surprise rang out from a giant tree several kilometers away, and the fiend celestial immediately cast its gaze toward that direction before opening its mouth to expel a ball of dark green light, within which contained a small green vial that was several inches tall. Chapter 2445. Obtaining the fruit, the vial then abruptly vanished into thin air, and in the next instant fierce winds were swept up above the forest, while 5-colored spirit clouds converged from all directions. A gargantuan vial opening suddenly emerged from the clouds, then released a flurry of countless dark green runes. As soon as these runes surged out of the vial, they exploded into clouds of azure chi, and an enormous burst of law fluctuations instantly descended upon this entire space. A burst of loud rumbling rang out, and the air tremored slightly as countless trees and tons of soil were flung up into the air. In the blink of an eye, a vast region of the forest had been uprooted, and everything that rose up into the air was instantly reduced to powder upon reaching within 10,000 feet of the vial's opening before being instantly drawn in. Everything in a radius of thousands of kilometers was instantly erased before being enshrouded under an azure light barrier, creating a giant black basin that was extremely smooth and completely devoid of life, and it was also rapidly growing deeper. All of a sudden, a ball of white light erupted out of the basin, then transformed into a massive elephant that was over 10,000 feet tall. The elephant was snowy white in color and had a pair of reddish-purple fiery wings on its back, which sent waves of purple flames surging toward Han Li with just a single flap. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly at the sight of the white flying elephant, and he immediately pointed a finger up at the vial opening in the sky while chanting an incantation. Azure light flashed again within the vial, and something shot out in a flash. All of a sudden, the white elephant let loose an anguished cry, and a dark green chain had appeared around its body in a wraith-like manner, binding it tightly in the blink of an eye. The giant elephant flapped its wings frantically as a layer of white light surged all over its body, sending enormous power erupting forth in all directions, but the green chain refused to be shaken off and was only growing tighter and thicker. A thunderous roar rang out as the giant elephant was shattered like a piece of fine china, revealing a middle-aged monk in a white kassaya with a panicked look on his face. He cast his gaze toward the converging green chain, then gritted his teeth before pulling a thin crimson blade out of his sleeve, which he slashed viciously toward the oncoming chain. A burst of crimson light exploded as a strong rank odor wafted through the air, and a scintillating crimson flower bloomed in the sky to envelop the monk's entire body. However, the dark green chain remained completely unscathed and wound itself around the monk's body with ease. At the same time, bursts of green light appeared nearby before converging toward the center, and a series of green tornadoes rose up into the heavens, releasing a burst of incredible force that instantly tore the crimson flower into shreds. Immediately thereafter, the tornadoes transformed into countless azure paper-thin blades that surged toward the monk. All of the blades had dark green spirit patterns all over their surfaces and were giving off faint law fluctuations. The bound monk's face completely paled as he swept his spiritual sense toward these azure blades, and he hurriedly yelled, "Stop! I concede and am willing to offer you my Dao badge." As soon as his voice trailed off, he opened his mouth to release a silver badge. Han Li immediately ceased chanting his incantation before casting an expressionless gaze toward the silver badge. "Only one? Where are the others? If you don't surrender them, I'll have to take them by force." The monk's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this, and after a brief moment of contemplation he sighed with a wry smile, "All right, I'll give you all of my Dao badges. Looks like I had no choice but to completely back out of this competition." Immediately thereafter, he opened his mouth again to release 2 more silver badges. Right after those 2 badges were released, spatial fluctuations erupted beneath the monk, and a 5-colored light formation appeared, following which the monk abruptly vanished on the spot, leaving only the 3 silver badges and dark green chain behind. Han Li was completely unsurprised to see this, and the green chain and massive vial opening in the sky both disappeared at his behest. The surrounding green light barrier and 5-colored clouds in the sky also vanished, following which a small green vial slowly descended from the heavens. At the same time, the 3 silver badges also flew toward Han Li on their own. Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to stow the vial and badges away, then departed from this area as a streak of azure light. Moments later, several streaks of light converged from different directions, then inspected the area with their spiritual sense from afar before carefully departing as well. Several days later, Han Li was in his giant golden ape form with 3 heads and 6 arms, and he pulverized a giant insect with a single punch, upon which a silver badge emerged. Han Li opened the mouth of his central head to swallow the badge, then reverted back to his human form before flying away. Half a month later, Han Li was facing off against a yellow-robed elderly man and a red-robed woman above a boundless sea in a triangular formation. In contrast with the grim expressions worn by the other 2, Han Li remained completely expressionless. Between them was a golden whale that was over 10,000 feet in length, and its body was riddled with wounds, while its aura was barely detectable, indicating that it was on the brink of death. Judging from the power of this illusionary beast, it must have more than 1 Dao badge in its body. "You 2 clearly don't intend to back out, so I'll take your Dao badges as well," Han Li said in a bone-chilling voice. "Your powers are indeed incredible, but aren't you underestimating Mistress Huarong and myself? Let's see if you can back up your arrogance." The yellow-robed elderly man harumphed coldly. As soon as his voice trailed off, he made a grabbing motion with both hands, summoning a giant black sword and a green pagoda. The black sword immediately conjured up a massive black sandstorm, while the green pagoda swelled to the size of a mountain before layers of dazzling light swept toward Han Li out of its bottom. Meanwhile, the red-robed woman made a hand seal, and bursts of crimson flames erupted out of her body as she transformed into a massive crimson fiery phoenix. The phoenix raised its head and let loose a clear cry, then flapped its wings vigorously and swept toward Han Li as a sea of scorching flames. In response, Han Li raised a hand to summon his 3 extreme mountains, which formed a protective barrier before him, then flipped his other hand over to release the small green vial, which he tossed up into the air while chanting an incantation. A month later, several elders of the true dragon race were standing on a platform in a mysterious space, casting their eyes toward a certain direction. All of a sudden, a streak of azure light shot forth from that direction before quickly arriving above the platform, then descended in front of the elders. Upon landing on the platform, Hanli cast his gaze toward Elder Jean with a faint smile on his face. Haha, as expected, you're the first person to have gathered enough badges and arrived at the Dao platform, fellow Daoist Han, Elder Jean chuckled. You're far too kind, Senior Jean. I was very fortunate to have been able to collect these Dao badges so quickly. Please examine the badges to make sure that there are enough, Hanli replied as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing over 100 silver badges, all of which hovered in mid-air before the group of elders. Elder Jean swept his spiritual sense over the badges before quickly giving a nod of approval. There are 108 badges here, enough for a vast spirit Dao fruit. Elder Feng, bring out a Dao fruit for fellow Daoist Han. A white-robed elder nodded in response before pulling a pristine white jade box out of his sleeve, then removed the lid to reveal a fist-sized reddish-purple fruit. The fruit was as translucent as a crystal, and was giving off an indescribable fragrant aroma. Even just a slight whiff of the fruit from afar struck Hanli with an instant boost in alertness, and he accepted the jade box before appraising the fruit inside with an intense gaze. As expected of the number one spirit fruit in all realms, this is truly an extraordinary creation of nature. I'm sure you already know the effects of this fruit, so I won't bore you with an explanation. Unfortunately, this fruit can only be consumed once in a lifetime. Otherwise, there's no way we'd be willing to hold this convention. By the way, prolonged exposure is detrimental to the vast spirit Dao fruit, so please stow it away as soon as possible, Elder Jean cautioned in a friendly manner. Thank you for the advice, Senior Jean, but that won't be necessary, Hanli said with a smile before pulling the fruit out of the box, then consumed it in a few quick mouthfuls. All of the elders looked on with stunned expressions, while Hanli smacked his lips a few times, seemingly eager for more. Only after a long while did Elder Jean return to his senses, and a wry smile appeared on his face as he said, I didn't think you'd consume the Dao fruit right away, fellow Daoist Han. The safest way to deal with such an extraordinary fruit would naturally be to consume it as soon as possible. Otherwise it would only attract trouble, Hanli said with a smile. That's obviously up to you in the end. By the way, the effect of the vast spirit Dao fruit can be extended if you consume a few other types of spirit items along with it, Elder Jean said. 10,000 years of the vast spirit Dao physique should be sufficient for my cultivation. If I can't make a substantial breakthrough during this time, then an extension won't be of much use to me. In any case, your true dragon race has done me a great service, and I'll be sure to repay you in the future. There are a few more people who are almost here, so I'll be taking my leave now. Hanli cupped his fist in a parting salute, then flew away as a streak of azure light, vanishing into the distant sky after just a few flashes. As expected of someone who's slain a true immortal. If he can ascend to the true immortal realm, he'll definitely cause quite a stir there as well, Elder Feng praised. He'll have to actually be able to ascend first, Elder Jean said with a peculiar look in his eyes. What do you mean by that? With his current power, surely there would be a very good chance of success for him to transcend his ascension cultivation now that he's consumed the vast spirit Dao fruit, a green-robed female elder said. The other elders were also rather befuddled to hear this. Instead of giving a direct reply, Elder Jean stroked his own bear and asked, what did you all think of his spiritual sense? It's very powerful, perhaps one of the most powerful among all beings participating in this Dao fruit convention, Elder Feng replied. That's an understatement. If I'm not mistaken, he's only displayed a small portion of the full extent of his spiritual sense, Elder Jean said. How is that possible? Wouldn't that mean that even our spiritual sense wouldn't be able to compare with his? Could it be that you verified this using that secret technique already? Someone immediately exclaimed. Of course, I wouldn't make such claims without any basis. The more powerful one's spiritual sense is, the more beneficial it would be for their chances at successful ascension, but his spiritual sense is too powerful, to the extent that it's exceeded the upper limit of what living beings in the lower realms can handle. My innate secret technique tells me that despite his powerful spiritual sense, its foundation is extremely shaky, and if he can't find a way to rectify this, he most likely won't even be able to survive past a few more centuries, Elder Jean explained. How could this be? I wonder if he's aware of this himself. Even if he isn't, he'll sense this soon enough, but by then, it would most likely already be too late. That's true. Matters regarding spiritual sense are always the most troublesome to deal with, so we can't really help him. Otherwise, Elder Jean would have revealed this to him earlier. Just as the elders were discussing this revelation, a streak of white light suddenly appeared in the distant sky before arriving near the platform, where it was revealed to be a handsome white-robed young man with a golden crown on his head. He cupped his fist in a salute and said, Xianyuan Jie of the Xianyuan race pays his respects to the fellow Taoists of the True Dragon race. You're a member of the ancient Xianyuan race? All of the elders were stunned to hear this, and they immediately focused their attention on the young man, quickly forgetting about the topic of conversation surrounding Han Li. A year later, Han Li returned to the Boundless Sea, and after a brief reunion with Nangong Wan and the others, he issued a string of orders to everyone in the Azure Origin Palace before going into seclusion in his secret chamber. This seemed to be an extremely important period of seclusion, and it stretched on for an unbroken period of 200 years. During this time, the human race underwent an astonishing transformation. Several years after Han Li went into seclusion, Fairy Ice Soul returned to the human race as a grand ascension stage being, creating a massive stir among all neighboring races. Immediately thereafter, the Wood Tribe and many other weaker races near the human race willingly pledged subordination to the human race one after another. After that, the nearby races who were on bad terms with the human race abandoned their territory and entered the primordial world, mass migrating to somewhere else on the continent. The human race naturally seized all of this vacant territory. At the same time, many foreign races across the Tianyuan continent were expressing an urge to be on friendly terms with the human race, and there were even some races like the Flying Spirit race, that declared that they were willing to forge alliances with the human race. Thus, in the short span of less than a century, the human race had been thrust firmly under the limelight. During this period, some cultivation arts and secret techniques of extremely high calibers began to spread within the human race, alongside many treasures that could be found almost nowhere else. As a result, many high-grade human cultivators who were stuck at bottlenecks made breakthroughs in an extremely short period of time, and intense competition had been sparked among the juniors with exceptional aptitude. The demon race didn't undergo anywhere near as drastic a transformation, but it also benefited significantly from the uprising of the human race. The demon race occupied the territory that was neglected by the human race, thereby expanding its territory by around twofold. Some of the new cultivation arts, secret techniques, pills, and treasures that had appeared in the human race also spread to the demon race, benefiting it immensely. If one were to carefully investigate all of this, they would discover that all of these things stemmed from the same place. Everything was originating in the area near the Azure Origin Palace before somehow spreading into other areas and accelerating the growth of the two races by a downright ridiculous extent. Another 200 years passed by, and on this day, a group of devilish guards were patrolling through the air at a low altitude on several black beast-drawn carriages over the original sealed site in the Elder Devil realm. Once the group of patrolling guards were far away, Han Li emerged out of thin air amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. He cast his gaze toward the guards in the distance, then turned his attention deeper into the original sealed site. I didn't think that the spirit refinement technique would be so troublesome that even Mo Guang and Huashuzi are unable to do anything about it. It's a pity I only managed to gather a small portion of that immortal's memories. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to make this trip, Han Li murmured to himself as he vanished into thin air again. A day later, he reappeared in a secluded area within the original sealed site. Not far up ahead was a crimson altar, upon which was placed a black bowl with 8 azure copper pillars around it. As Han Li approached the altar, a male voice rang out from the bowl. So you came after all, fellow Taoist Han. At this point, I'm sure you no longer have any suspicions about the peril of the spirit refinement technique. Indeed, after spending 200 years in seclusion, Han Li had finally discovered the underlying issues in his spiritual sense, thereby forcing him to venture into the Elder Devil realm again. Does our agreement still stand, Senior? Han Li asked. Of course I wouldn't go back on my word, the male voice replied without any hesitation. Han Li's expression eased slightly upon hearing this and he said, In that case I agree to your condition. Please tell me the way to cultivate the 3rd stage of the spirit refinement technique. You've made a wise decision, fellow Taoist Han. Only by mastering the 3rd stage will you buy yourself enough time to ascend to the true immortal realm, the male voice said in an elated manner. Immediately thereafter, A streak of white light flew out of the black bowl before reaching Han Li in a flash. This was a palm-sized jade talisman with countless golden and silver runes etched on its surface, as well as specks of five-colored light flashing around it. This is the talisman that can directly contact the true immortal realm. The way to activate it. Half a day later, a streak of azure light flew out of the lake at the center of the original sealed site, then departed toward a certain direction. Within the azure light, Han Li had his hands clasped behind his back with a contemplative look on his face. 300 years later, Bai Guer was situated in a certain hall in the Azure Origin Palace, delivering a report in a respectful manner to the seated Han Li. At the conclusion of her report, she extended a slight bow before summoning a white storage bracelet that she offered to Han Li with both hands. Well done, Guer. Not only have you progressed significantly in your cultivation during your journey, you've also tracked down a large quantity of Vastine stones, many more than I had expected, Han Li said with a pleased smile after inspecting the contents of the storage bracelet with his spiritual sense. Chapter 2447. Returning to the human world, I discovered an extremely secluded profound jade mine while traveling through the western region of the Thunder Continent, and at the core of that mine was where I found all of this Vastine stone, Bai Guer replied in a respectful manner. I see. In any case, if you hadn't cultivated your ice essence body to this level, you most likely wouldn't have been able to sense these Vastine stones. You can go for now. I'll be sure to reward you handsomely for this later, Han Li said with a warm expression. Yes, master. Bai Guer extended another obedient salute before departing from the hall. Following her departure, a contemplative look appeared on Han Li's face. He finally had the materials required to refine the Vastine Glacial Soul Mountain, and once he did that, he would only have to track down the materials for one more extreme mountain to complete the set. He wasn't concerned about this as he had witnessed Great North Essence light in the Devilfall Valley of the human world, so he would most likely be able to easily find Great North Essence crystals there. However, at his current cultivation base, there was no way that he would be able to descend into the human world in person. Otherwise, the power of the realm would pose a huge headache to him. As such, he would have to use the star-defying plate and expend a very heavy price to send a fragment of his soul back to the human world. The soul fragment that he had been nurturing in the Origin Soul Lamp this entire time was finally going to come in useful. At the thought of returning to the human world, places such as the Seven Mysteries Sect, Yellow Maple Valley, and Cloudfall Sect immediately sprang into his mind. At the same time, he couldn't help but reminisce about his parents, little sister, Li Feiyu, Monarch of Soul Divergence, and other people from that distant period in his life. Several months later, an earth-shattering boom rang out within a secret chamber in the Azure Origin Palace. At the center of the secret chamber was a giant crimson cauldron, within which was a small snowy white mountain with countless silver flames burning around it. As soon as the mountain emerged from the cauldron, it immediately swelled drastically in size, and a series of white runes appeared on its surface as it released a burst of white glacial chi. The Vastine Glacial Soul Mountains is finally complete. All that's left now is the Great North Essence Mountain, Han Li murmured to himself as he sat in a corner of the secret chamber. A year later, there were several menacing-looking men huddled around a fire, roasting a small beast while conversing loudly with one another. They were situated on a secluded path on the border of the Great Gene, and even though their clothes were very much worse for wear, all of them had blood-stained weapons placed beside them. In a corner beside the fire was a frail man who was lying on the ground. This was a blue-robed man who appeared to be only around 21 to 22 years of age, and his face was very pale. His eyes were tightly shut, and his body was bound by a thick rope. There was also a wooden rod that had been sharpened on both ends bound around his mouth, and blood was flowing incessantly from the corners of his lips. It seemed that he was on the brink of death. However, the group of men paid no heed to him and continued to converse with one another in a boisterous manner. After some time, one of the men suddenly said, "That bastard should be dead by now, right? Someone go take a look. To think that a frail scholar would dare to try and interfere with our business. He must have a death wish. I'll go take a look. He hasn't moved for quite a while now, so he should be just about dead. If not, I'll send him on his way," another man said with a cold expression as he picked up his weapon. "Suit yourself, but make it quick. We have to leave this area tomorrow." The entire world is in turmoil at the moment. It's not going to be easy to make a living, the first man said in a nonchalant manner. A cold smile appeared on the second man's face, and he made his way over to the blue-robed man with weapon in hand before giving him a vicious kick. The blue-robed man was sent flying for several feet before landing on his back, but he remained completely still, and the blood on the corners of his lips was beginning to congeal. He's dead. Tui, lucky bastard, you've saved yourself some torture, that's for sure. The second man spat onto the ground before turning to return to the fire. Right at this moment, a gust of gray wind swept forth, and a burst of sinister cackling rang out. Fantastic. I didn't think I would encounter such exceptional prey in such a secluded area. Once I suck away your souls, that treasure of mine will finally be successfully refined. It's that demonic cultivator who's been wreaking havoc in the area. Run. One of the men exclaimed as his expression changed drastically, and he didn't even dare to make a grab for his weapon before fleeing the scene. Everyone else also scattered and ran for their lives in a horrified manner as well. Thus, the blue-robed man was the only one left beside the fire. The cackling continued, and all of a sudden, several bursts of black chi shot forth in different directions. Moments later, a string of blood-curdling cries rang out in succession from those directions. The cackling then abruptly ceased, and all of the black chi converged above the fire before transforming into a black-robed Taoist priest. The Taoist priest had a pair of small eyes that gave off a sinister appearance, and he was holding a gray crystal ball with an elated expression. The souls of those people contain a vast amount of baleful chi. They must have killed many people during their lifetimes. These souls are exceptional for refining this treasure. There's someone else there whose soul hasn't scattered yet. I'll go ahead and take it as well. A hint of surprise appeared on the Taoist priest's face as he spotted the blue-robed man on the ground, and he released a burst of black chi from the crystal ball that swept directly toward the blue-robed man. Boom. In the instant that the black chi came into contact with the blue-robed man, it abruptly exploded, sweeping up powerful shockwaves that forced the Taoist priest to rush back in retreat. Who's there? Come out right now. The Taoist priest exclaimed in an alarmed manner, then immediately released several talismans to form several light barriers around himself while inspecting his surroundings with a wary expression. Judging from your aura, it looks like you're using a devil Tao cultivation art of the lowest caliber. A male voice suddenly rang out nearby. Who's there? The Taoist priest hurriedly cast his gaze toward the direction that the voice had come from, only to be completely stunned by what he saw. The blue-robed man had sat up with an indifferent expression, and the rope around his body and wooden stick in his mouth had both disappeared. Who are you? Did you come here for me? The Taoist priest asked in a wary manner as countless thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. Did I come here for you? You think far too highly of yourself. No one in this entire human world is important enough to deserve a visit from me, the blue-robed man said as a hint of mockery appeared on his face. Human world? Could it be that you're... I don't have time to waste speaking with a junior like you, the blue-robed man abruptly cut off the Taoist priest with a cold look in his eyes, then opened his mouth to release an azure thread. The light barriers around the Taoist priest's body were instantly destroyed, and a hole that was around as thick as a finger was blown through his glabella, upon which he collapsed to the ground before he could even make a single sound. The blue-robed man waved a hand to draw the body of the Taoist priest over to him before he laid a hand on the Taoist priest's head. Blue light flashed within his eyes as a translucent thread shot out of his glabella before vanishing into the Taoist priest's head in a flash. Moments later, he released the Taoist priest, and his body collapsed to the ground again. So the entire Great Gene is currently in the midst of a major war. How interesting. It doesn't have anything to do with me this time, but it seems that the human world is in complete turmoil again. It's a pity that this man's only at the Foundation establishment stage and doesn't know a lot. I wonder how things are at the Heavenly South region, the blue-robed man murmured to himself as he rose to his feet in an unhurried manner. He had been possessed by Han Li's soul fragment, which had descended into the human world. The soul fragment was only imbued with peak nascent soul stage magic power, but that already granted him near invincibility in the human world. Han Li examined his own dirty robes, then raised a hand to touch his own face, and his brows furrowed slightly. All of a sudden, he made a hand seal, and a layer of azure light surged over his body, upon which he transformed into an ordinary-looking azure-robed young man. After that, he rose up into the air and flew away as a streak of azure light. Outside a certain giant city in the Great Gene, millions of soldiers were scaling up tall ladders with all their might, attempting to reach the top of the city wall. In response, the opposing soldiers on the city wall were retaliating with arrows and spears to keep the enemies at bay, and the entire battle was a massive bloodbath. There were also several hundred cultivators battling at an altitude of tens of thousands of feet, and on one side was a vast expanse of baleful chi, within which were countless ghostly shadows, while on the other side, several small formations had been set up, and all types of treasures were unleashing their powers. The most powerful beings among these cultivators was a pair of core formation cultivators, while the rest were mostly at the foundation establishment stage. As expected, these sects have played an important role behind the turmoil of the Great Gene. Regardless of who gets the last laugh, it looks like the imperial family of the Great Gene is about to be dethroned. Hanli sighed as he looked on from a white cloud in the sky. All of his experiences in the Great Gene were still as clear in mind as if they had taken place yesterday, but in reality, most of his acquaintances and even many of the sects that he was familiar with had most likely ceased to exist by now. This battle was naturally not of much interest to Han Li, and after lingering nearby for a short while longer, he made a hand seal and vanished on the spot. Within the restricted area in the southern region of the Great Gene, groups of cultivators wearing attire from a range of different sects were routinely patrolling a giant black mountain that extended all the way up into the clouds. An extremely powerful flight restriction had been set up here, so aside from the most powerful nascent soul stage beings in this realm, no one would be able to reach the mountain through an aerial route. Many years ago, this mountain had been the center of extensive conflict, and even many high-grade cultivators had perished on it. In the end, it had been sealed and was being guarded by several major sects, all the way until today. At this point, most of the treasures on the mountain were already gone, so no high-grade beings were interested in it anymore. As such, even though the mountain appeared to be extremely tightly guarded, all of the guards were simply going through the motions and not taking their duty seriously. All of a sudden, a faint shadow vanished into the black mountain in a flash, completely bypassing the restrictions and guards. Around an hour later, Han Li appeared over 1,000 feet above the summit of the mountain, and with his enormous spiritual sense, he was able to instantly inspect every single inch of the mountain despite the many restrictions in place. A complex look appeared on Han Li's face as he appraised this mountain that was both extremely familiar, but also completely alien to him. Seeing as Kunwu Mountain is no longer the place it once was, there's no need for it to continue to exist. Allow me to erase you from this realm, Han Li sighed as he rose up higher into the air as a streak of azure light. Moments later, a gargantuan azure hand that was over 10,000 feet in length appeared above the mountain amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, and the palm came crashing down amid an earth-shattering boom. Countless layers of restrictions were instantly activated, but they didn't even manage to slow down the giant azure hand in the slightest as it raised the mountain to the ground, leaving only an extremely deep massive crater in its place. The patrolling guards were all astonished to see this, and they couldn't help but wonder if they were in a dream. Shortly thereafter, some nascent soul cultivators who had been notified of the situation quickly arrived on the scene. However, after an investigation, they were unable to detect anything aside from some residual spiritual power in the area, so they could only depart with even more questions than they had come with. After that, this event became one of the 10 most incredible legends of the Great Gene, and it was discussed by countless cultivators over many years to come. However, as time passed, the tale began to die out, and after 10,000 years had passed, there were only some brief mentions of Kunwu Mountain that could be seen in some ancient tomes. At this moment, Heavenly Star City of the Scattered Star Seas was extremely lively and bustling, and countless boats of different sizes were converging toward it from all directions. Countless foundation establishment and core formation cultivators had gathered in the city, and occasionally, a nascent soul cultivator or two could be seen flying toward the top of the Star Palace. This day was the 2000th birthday of Patriarch Ling, the master of the Star Palace, and all of the powers in the entire Scattered Star Seas had begun preparing presents over 10 years ago. This was all in an effort to appease Patriarch Ling so that the Star Palace would continue to protect them. At noon, several tens of nascent soul cultivators had gathered in the Star Palace, and all of them were appraising the woman on the main seat with respectful expressions. The woman wore a white palatial dress and had skin as fair as jade. She was extremely beautiful, and as she cast her gaze around the hall, all of the nascent soul cultivators whom her gaze fell upon immediately lowered their heads as a gesture of respect. As the only early deity transformation cultivator in the entire Scattered Star Seas and the master of the Star Palace, this Patriarch Ling was deserving of such respect. Once spirit fruits and tea had been brought to all of the nascent soul cultivators by some female servants, Patriarch Ling said, "It's about time, let's begin the ceremony." Someone immediately gave an affirmative response, yet just as the commencement of the ceremony was about to be officially announced, A male voice suddenly rang out outside the hall. He looks like I came at just the right time. Surely you have some wine to spare for an old friend, Fairy Ling? As soon as the voice trailed off, Han Li appeared outside the hall before making his way into the room with a faint smile. All of the nascent soul cultivators present immediately swept their spiritual sense toward him, only to find that he was giving off no spiritual power fluctuations whatsoever, as if he were a mere mortal. A hint of bewilderment appeared on Patriarch Ling's face upon hearing this voice, and upon seeing the owner of the voice she immediately rose to her feet in an astonished manner as she said in a trembling voice, "How could this? How could you still be in this realm?" "I have some matters to attend to in this realm, so I had no choice but to come. I must congratulate you on reaching the deity transformation stage following my departure, Fairy Ling," Han Li replied with a faint smile. "Everyone please vacate the hall. I wish to speak with this old friend in private," Ling Yuling suddenly instructed in a cold voice. All of the nascent soul cultivators in the hall had no idea what was going on, nor this new arrival was, but they didn't dare to object and could only take their leave. Thus Han Li and Ling Yuling were soon the only ones left in the hall. Following everyone's departure, Ling Yuling immediately activated a restriction in the hall, then asked in an elated manner, "Fellow Taoist Han, did you descend from the spirit realm?" "I did. However, that's a long story that I can tell you about in detail later. It's been many years since I left the human world, so there are some things that I need to ask you about," Han Li replied in an unhurried manner. "Rest assured, Brother Han, I've rarely ventured out of the scattered star seas during these past years, but I know everything that's been happening in the human world like the back of my hand," Ling Yuling said as a complex look appeared on her face. "That's good to hear. I haven't met any of my past acquaintances aside from you during this trip, and all I want to know about is how my past acquaintances and the powers I was once associated with have been doing," Han Li said. After that, Han Li stayed in the hall with Ling Yuling for half a day before the restriction around the hall disintegrated, and a streak of azure light shot out. "I hope to see you again in the spirit realm someday, fellow Taoist Ling." After that parting sentence, Han Li vanished into the distant sky. Inside the hall, Ling Yuling was still seated on a chair, holding a jade slip in her hand with an excited expression. Meanwhile, Heavenly Star City was already tens of thousands of kilometers away, pondering what Ling Yuling had just told him. It turned out that the island that he had Nangong Wan had left behind in the scattered star seas had become the base for a major power, led by his disciple, Tian Qiner, and several other juniors of theirs. Technically speaking, the members of that power were grand disciples of his. There was no lack of core formation and nascent soul cultivators among their ranks, including one of the nascent soul cultivators attending Ling Yuling's birthday ceremony. Ling Yuling had taken good care of them in Han Li's absence, and they were developing smoothly, so Han Li decided not to go and meet them. Tian Qiner herself had failed to transcend her deity transformation stage tribulation many years ago and perished as a result. Thankfully, she had made some preparations beforehand, allowing her to preserve a part of her soul, so there was still a chance that she could be reincarnated. As for Shi Jian, the disciple of his who had inherited the teachings of the monarch of soul divergence, he had perished at the nascent soul during a battle against a powerful enemy. However, prior to his death, he had taken several disciples with great aptitude. As such, not only had the teachings of the monarch of soul divergence not gone into decline, it had experienced a resurgence of late. The Yellow Maple Valley and Drifting Cloud sect had diverged in completely different directions during these past years. At the time, the Yellow Maple Valley had been facing a major crisis, but since then, it had taken several extremely prodigious disciples, most of whom had become nascent soul cultivators. As a result, the Yellow Maple Valley had enjoyed a resurgence and was now a major sect in the Heavenly South region. In contrast, the Drifting Cloud sect had a massive foundation forged for it by Han Li, but its nascent soul elders had fallen one after another due to different circumstances. In the 1,000 years after that, no other nascent soul elder had emerged among its ranks, and it had now been reduced to a third-rate sect in the Dreamcloud mountain range. Even the major sects of old, such as the Ancient Sword sect and 100 Possibilities Pavilion, had mostly been replaced by newer sections. Han Li was struck by a sense of mixed emotions upon hearing about all of this, but there was nothing he could do aside from give a wry smile. Half a year later, Han Li was standing near a set of secluded ruins in the Unation of the Heavenly South region, appraising a dilapidated stone wall with a contemplative expression. The ruins had clearly been abandoned for a long time, and it was rife with unkempt weeds and shrubs, and the bricks were covered in thick layers of dark green moss. There was a small gray section left exposed on the stone wall ahead of Han Li, and a corner of a Han character could be seen engraved on the wall. After a while, the sound of footsteps suddenly rang out behind Han Li, and a couple rounded the corner with their son. The couple appeared to be around 30 years of age, and the man had dark skin with large hands and feet, while the woman had an air of simplistic beauty about her. Both of them were carrying baskets that were filled with things such as incense, and they appeared to be an average couple. The two of them faltered slightly at the sight of Han Li, while their son, who appeared to be 7 or 8 years of age, was also appraising Han Li with curiosity in his bright and adorable eyes. The man hesitated momentarily before making his way toward Han Li with his wife and son. Greetings, may I ask your name? Han Li had his back facing the man, but judging from his attire, the man could tell that Han Li was a well-educated individual, and that evoked a sense of respect within the man, who had rarely ever left the village. I am a member of the Han family, and I've come to visit the old Han family ancestral hall, Han Li replied as he turned around, and there was a very slight resemblance between him and the man. A hint of elation appeared on the man's face upon hearing this. I see, you must be from another branch of our Han family. I heard from my great-grandfather that our Han family was once a very prosperous family over 1,000 years ago, and there were many people coming back from different places to pay their respects at the ancestral hall, but that's become a rarer occurrence of late. As time passes by, the members of those branches of the Han family will gradually forget their roots, so it's no surprise that there are fewer and fewer of them returning to visit the ancestral hall. I have to give you credit for staying here, Han Li said with a hint of approval in his voice. I heard from great-grandfather that his generation had thought about leaving, but they couldn't bear to leave this place behind. Apparently, an ancestor of our Han family became a deity. If we were to leave, that deity wouldn't be able to find us if he ever returned someday, so we decided to stay, the man chuckled in response. A deity, eh? I've heard of that as well, but that legend was passed down from thousands of years ago, so it may not have much credibility, Han Li said. I'm not sure about that, but that's what all my seniors told me. Also, during a past ceremony, my great-grandfather once brought out a scabbard of a divine sword that was said to have been left behind by that deity ancestor of ours, so I'm sure there's some truth in that tale, the man said with a smile. A sword scabbard? Han Li raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. For some reason, the man felt Han Li's presence to be very comforting and he said, that's right. According to me seniors, the scabbard had always been worshipped in the ancestral hall, and many years ago, it saved our Han family from a major crisis. Unfortunately, after it was used that one time, the sword disintegrated into golden light, leaving only the scabbard behind. The scabbard doesn't appear to possess any special powers, but it's always been worshipped nonetheless. I heard that our Han family fell into rapid decline during a subsequent crisis as we no longer had the divine sword, and that forced its members to split up and leave. I see. I don't know about all of that, but a family will inevitably experience peaks and troughs. Is this your son? He looks like a very smart boy. What's his name? Han Li asked in a nonchalant manner as he cast his gaze toward the little boy. The man was very pleased to hear Han Li praising his son, and he nudged his son forward as he said, this is my third eldest son, Han Ming. Minger, come here and greet your senior. The boy was very young, but he wasn't shy at all and immediately knelt down before kowtowing to Han Li twice as a greeting. Han Li had identified that the boy possessed a spiritual root, and even though it was only an ordinary one, it still evoked a sense of hope within Han Li. Good boy. Seeing as we've met here, we must have some type of affinity. Here is a gift for your son. If he's fortunate, then perhaps this will be a major opportunity for him. Even if it doesn't work out that way, this will ensure that he lives a very long life. Immediately thereafter, he flipped a hand over to summon a jade badge, which he cast an incantation seal into before attaching a red string to it, then placed it around the boy's neck. The jade badge began to glow with white light, then suddenly vanished in a flash along with the red string. The boy's parents were astonished to see this, and by the time they looked up, Han Li was already nowhere to be seen. The boy's father was immediately rooted to the spot, while his wife yelled, "Was that a ghost?" During the next few days, word of the ghost encounter experienced by Han Haizi and his family spread through the neighboring villages, providing a good topic for gossip. Only after several months had passed by did everyone forget about this incident. However, several months after that, Han Ming unintentionally discovered the secret within the jade badge and suddenly left his home. Several years later, he was able to use the power of the badge to become a disciple to a nascent soul stage elder of the Drifting Cloud sect. From there, he went on to become a vastly renowned cultivator, and the Han family experienced another resurgence as a result. The outskirts of the Devil Fall Valley was once a lively and bustling place, but as the supply of spirit medicines there dwindled, it had become a deserted place that no one was willing to venture into. However, on this day, an azure shadow ignored all of the residual restrictions within the valley and flew directly into it. Half a day later, an earth-shattering boom suddenly rang out within the Devil Fall Valley, causing the nearby area to tremor violently. Immediately thereafter, a streak of azure light shot out before vanishing into the distance after just a few flashes. Such a massive commotion naturally alerted all of the nearby sects, and disciples were immediately sent to investigate. As a result, everyone was stunned to discover that a mountain that separated the inner and outer valley had disappeared, and there was only a gargantuan crater in its wake with wisps of silver light surging out of the ground. Great North Essence Light. Some of the more knowledgeable and experienced cultivators immediately identified this light, and many of them hurriedly entered the giant crater to try and collect some Great North Essence crystals. Unfortunately, even after scouring the crater hundreds of times, they could only find around a dozen of these crystals, and a significant conflict erupted between these cultivators as a result. The one who was responsible for all of this was naturally none other than Han Li. He had excavated the Great North Essence crystals under the Devil Fall Valley, then arrived in a secluded cave nearby before setting up an extremely complex formation. There was no need for him to remain in the human world any longer, so he was preparing to return to the spirit realm. However, due to the fact that he had to return with the Great North Essence crystals, it was more difficult than when he had ascended, so he had no choice but to use a formation. Several hours later, the formation was finally complete. Han Li sat at the center of the formation and made a hand seal, upon which a giant five-colored disc flew out of his body. The entire formation immediately began to buzz incessantly, and bursts of spiritual light swept out of it to inundate Han Li's entire body. Moments later, a rumbling boom rang out within the cave, and a thick pillar of white light erupted out of the heavens, only disappearing after it had reached an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the same time, Han Li suddenly reverted back into the blue-robed man, who slumped onto the formation and fell completely still again. Within a secret chamber in the Azure Origin Palace, Han Li suddenly opened his eyes, and a yellow storage bracelet appeared on the futon in front of him without any warning. A pleased look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this storage bracelet. With these Great North Essence crystals, he would finally be able to complete the integrated 5 extreme mountains. That, in addition to the True Soul Pill, would give him a very good chance to transcend his ascension tribulation. Of course, as a safety precaution, he had to master the 3rd stage of the spirit refinement technique and also capitalize on his vast spirit Tao physique to master the organ refinement origin arts and other immortal cultivation arts. Once all that was done, he would be ready for his tribulation. With that in mind, a hint of irrepressible excitement welled up in Han Li's heart. 8,000 years was an unimaginably long period of time for a mortal, but for ancient true spirits who went into slumber for thousands of years at a time, it was nothing more than the blink of an eye. 8,000 years later, the human race had become a first-rate power on the Tianyuan continent. On this day, countless mortals had gathered on the street of all of the human cities, discussing something among themselves with excited expressions. There were also armed guards patrolling the streets, as well as groups of cultivators patrolling the sky. All of the cities on the outskirts of human territory had activated all of their restrictions, and massive flying treasures loaded with armored warriors had risen up into the air. It was as if the entire human race were preparing for war. On the summit of a massive mountain tens of thousands of kilometers away from the city, 3 foreign Grand Ascension stage beings were seated across from one another. One of them was a burly man in a 5-colored beast-hide garment who was gulping down mouthfuls of wine, and he was joined by a white-robed young man with a pale complexion, as well as a heavily wrinkled green-robed elderly man. After a long while, the burly man suddenly asked, "Heavenly Lord Bai, it's about time, isn't it? The best time to transcend an ascension tribulation would be at noon, when the yang energy is most abundant. This is the most powerful being in the spirit realm we're talking about here, so he's definitely aware of this. Just be patient and wait for a while longer," the green-robed elderly man replied as he opened his eyes. "That's true. At such close proximity, there's no way we won't be alerted once the tribulation begins. It's been countless years since someone attempted an ascension tribulation. I'm getting a little excited just thinking about it," the burly man said with a smile. I can't recall when someone from the spirit realm last successfully transcended an ascension tribulation. I can only remember that it happened a very, very long time ago. I must say, this heavenly Zenith Han of the human race is very courageous for making no attempt to keep his tribulation transcendence a secret. In the past, everyone who's attempted such tribulations have always done so in secret in fear of being found out, the white-robed young man said with a hint of admiration in his voice. During these past years, many of our old acquaintances have disappeared. There must have been quite a few of them who had attempted tribulation transcendences in secret. Seeing as none of us detected those tribulation attempts, they must have all perished, the elderly man sighed. All of us are repressing our magic power with all our might in fear of attracting a heavenly tribulation too early, yet this heavenly Zenith Han is making a tribulation attempt after no more than 10,000 years as a grand ascension stage being. I also greatly admire his courage. By the way, fellow Taoist Bai, I heard that you encountered Heavenly Lord Han several thousand years ago. What kind of person is he? The burly man asked. I haven't had a chance to ever meet fellow Taoist Han, so I'm also quite interested to hear your answer, the white-robed young man chimed in with an intrigued expression. I did indeed meet fellow Taoist Han several thousand years ago, but I can't muster up the words to describe him, the elderly man replied with slightly furrowed brows after a brief hesitation. Then what were his powers like? Surely you were able to deduce that, the white-robed young man said. I can only say that he's extremely powerful. I didn't try to engage him in battle, but I'm sure that even 3 or 4 of me combined definitely wouldn't have been a match for him, the elderly man replied with a serious expression. What? Surely you jest, Heavenly Lord Bai? How could he possibly be able to defeat 3 or 4 of you at once? We've been acquaintances for a very long time, and we're extremely familiar with your powers, the white-robed young man exclaimed as he shook his head in disbelief. The burly man was also very skeptical to hear this. I wouldn't make jokes about something like this. If you two had gotten the chance to meet him, you would know why I'm making this assessment. Setting aside everything else, just a glance from him had struck me with a bone-chilling sensation. That's a clear indication that his spiritual sense is several times more powerful than my own, the elderly man replied with a wry smile. The white-robed young man and the burly man couldn't help but exchange a bewildered glance upon hearing this. In any case, this is good news. The more powerful fellow Taoist Han is, the greater the chance that he'll successfully transcend this tribulation. If that happens, energy fluctuations from the true immortal realm will emanate from the passageway that opens up the true immortal realm. All of the powerful beings in the entire realm should be able to sense this, and if we can attain enlightenment by immersing ourselves in those energy fluctuations, we'll be sure to benefit immensely. We're in very close proximity to fellow Taoist Han, so we should be able to sense those energy fluctuations more clearly, the burly man said as he returned to a calm expression. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't have gone to the trouble of coming all the way here, the white-robed young man chuckled in response. Thus, the 3 of them conversed for a while longer before falling silent again. Similar scenes were taking place in several other places outside the giant city. An astonishing number of Grand Ascension stage beings had gathered in the human territory, and many of them were old monsters who were constantly in seclusion and had to repress their magic power with all their might before they dared to come out. On the outskirts of a certain deserted island in the boundless sea, a man and a woman were standing next to one another. The woman was Fairy Ice Soul, and she was accompanied by a brocade-robed man with a remarkable disposition. There should be a very good chance that Brother Han succeeds in his tribulation transcendence. I'm sure we'll benefit immensely from witnessing such a spectacle at such close quarters, fellow Taoist Hu Jun, Fairy Ice Soul said. Indeed. If it weren't for the pills that had come out of the Azure Origin Palace, there's no way I would have been able to reach the Grand Ascension stage, and now, I'm once again benefiting from Heavenly Zenith Han, the man by the name of Hu Jun replied with a hint of admiration in his voice. He was a new Grand Ascension stage who had appeared in the human race during the past 1,000 years. As for Mo Jianli, he had perished during a major heavenly tribulation several hundred years ago. On the other side of the island were around a dozen cultivators standing in front of a giant black ark, among which was a trio of stunning beauties who were casting their eyes toward the center of the island with solemn expressions. These 3 were none other than Nangong Wan, Yuan Yao, and Silver Moon. Not long after Han Li's soul fragment returned from the human world, Yuan Yao and Yen Li had returned to the human race, where they moved into a side palace on the Origin Integration Island. As for Silver Moon, she had been freed from the curse of her art of indifference and reached the Grand Ascension stage over 1,000 years ago. Behind those three women were the Ice Phoenix and Han Li's direct disciples. During the past several thousand years, all of Han Li's disciples had reached the body integration stage. As for whether they would be able to reach the Grand Ascension stage, that was up to them. The Ice Phoenix, Nangong Wan, and Yuan Yao were all on the cusp of the Grand Ascension stage, and with her Ice Phoenix physique, the Ice Phoenix would presumably have a much better chance of reaching the Grand Ascension stage than the others. These were the people closest to Han Li, and they had immense confidence in him, but they still couldn't help but be concerned. High up in the sky close to 10,000 kilometers away, a black-robed young woman was standing on a black bird, looking in the direction of the deserted island with a complex expression. Beside her stood the Black Phoenix monarch, and she wore a sympathetic expression as she said, "Dyer, if you really want to bid farewell to Senior Han, then why don't you go to see him? Don't make this a lasting regret that could affect your mental state." "It's all right. Brother Han has always seen me as a little sister, and big sister Nangong and the others are already there, so there's no need for me to throw myself into the mix. I'll just watch his ascension from afar," Dyer replied in a calm manner. The Black Phoenix monarch could only heave a faint sigh in response. At the center of a giant formation that had been set up at the center of the island, Han Li, Daoist Xie, Mo Guang, and He Shuzi were gathered together, looking up into the sky. A five-colored cloud that encompassed virtually the entire island down below was slowly taking shape in the sky, and even though it was expanding at a very slow rate, the increase in its mass was still noticeable. "Looks like you'll have to transcend your ascension tribulation soon, fellow Daoist Han. With your powers, I'm sure you'll be able to transcend this tribulation with ease," Mo Guang said with a faint smile. "You think far too highly of me, brother Mo Guang. Countless Grand Ascension stage beings have perished at this hurdle. I certainly can't treat this tribulation lightly," Han Li replied. "Hee, that may apply to everyone else, but you've mastered the third stage of the spirit refinement technique and the organ refinement origin arts. Even the average immortal is most likely no match for you. If you were to encounter Ma Liang again in your current state, you'd be able to kill him with ease. I'm actually very intrigued. Your aptitude clearly isn't all that exceptional, but you've been able to cultivate these immortal abilities to a stunning extent. I must say I've never seen anyone like you," He Shuzi mused. "Perhaps I'm naturally suited to cultivating these immortal techniques," Han Li replied with a smile. Daoist Xie suddenly interjected, "Please don't forget the promise you made to me once you ascend to the true immortal realm, Master. You've recovered your memories and have accepted me as your master, so I'll be sure to follow through on my promise," Han Li replied with a serious expression. "Those were the wishes of my former master, and you'll only have a chance to fulfill them once you ascend," Daoist Xie replied with a nod. Right at this moment, the five-colored cloud in the sky had become extremely enormous, and it was giving off an indescribably heavy aura. "Please stay back, fellow Taoists. I'm about to transcend my tribulation," Han Li said as he looked up into the sky through narrowed eyes. Mo Guang and the others naturally had no objection to this, and they immediately flew away from Han Li. At the same time, Han Li swept a sleeve through the air to release Jin Tong, who also flew away in a flash. After that, he sat down with a calm expression. Soon, Mo Guang and the others had appeared on the other side of the island, where they drew to a halt before turning back to face the center of the island from afar. All of a sudden, a burst of loud rumbling rang out, and a giant black hole appeared within the five-colored cloud, following which a gust of gray wind swept forth. Initially, the gust of wind was quite unremarkable, but as soon as it left the black hole, it descended from above as a sea of fierce wind. "That's heavenly astral wind. It looks like the ascension tribulation is about to arrive," He Shuzi said with a faint smile. "This heavenly astral wind is quite formidable, but fellow Daoist Han has already prepared countermeasures against it, so he has nothing to fear," Mo Guang replied in an unhurried manner. As soon as his voice trailed off, an azure lotus flower bloomed at the center of the island. Initially, it was only around the size of a house, but it soon swelled to several acres in size before releasing countless streaks of azure sword chi that sliced through the nearby space. Lethal heavenly astral winds descended from above, but the azure lotus flower remained completely resolute, shielding Han Li within it. The storm of heavenly astral wind lasted several hours, and if a normal Grand Ascension stage cultivator were in Han Li's place, this storm alone would have whittled away most of their magic power, making it impossible for them to transcend the rest of the tribulation. However, to Han Li this was barely a warm-up. All of a sudden, the fierce winds gushing out of the black hole finally ceased, but it was immediately replaced by a scorching heat wave. Immediately thereafter, countless palm-sized crimson runes appeared around the edge of the black hole, and there were golden patterns flashing on each of the runes. A string of dull thumps rang out as these runes quickly exploded into balls of crimson light, then came crashing down from above as a storm of lava, staining the entire sky a crimson color in the process. The deserted island was extremely massive, and those on the outskirts of the island were situated very far away from Hanli, but they could still sense the scorching heat waves surging toward them from the distance, prompting them to release protective treasures to defend themselves. The Ink Spirit Holy Ark also shuddered before releasing a black light barrier to protect everyone on the Ark. A hint of concern flashed through the eyes of Nangong Wan and the others upon seeing this. They were already struggling to withstand the heat waves from so far away. The conditions had to be over 100 times worse for Hanli. What was even more worrisome to them was that the heavenly tribulation had only just begun. All of a sudden, a giant silver bird flew out of the massive lotus flower. Initially, the bird was only several tens of feet in size, but it was able to completely disregard the storm of lava as all of its feathers took on a faint golden hue. At the same time, it swelled to over 10,000 feet in size while releasing a burst of glacial power, transforming the entire area within a radius of thousands of kilometers into a world of glacial ice. 3 days and 3 nights later, tribulations of all types of descriptions rained down from the heavens, but Hanli was able to nullify them with ease. At this point, the entire island had already been destroyed, and there was only a light formation that was supporting the azure lotus flowers from below. The nearby surface of the sea had also dropped by several tens of feet, and one half was completely frozen, while the other was a world of scorching lava. Aside from Ice Soul, Silver Moon and several other Grand Ascension stage beings, everyone else had retreated further away. Once the black hole in the sky disappeared, balls of purple lightning began to appear within the 5-colored cloud, and the fearsome lightning tribulation finally arrived. However, Hanli was already prepared for this, and he raised a hand up into the air, upon which a small gray mountain appeared above the azure lotus flower before instantly swelling to over 100,000 feet tall. A series of gray halos then proliferated out of the mountain in all directions, and with each halo that the purplish-golden lightning flashed through, the power of the lightning would be slightly diminished. These halos were imbued with some type of power of law that specifically repressed the power of heavenly lightning. Some of the bolts of purplish-golden lightning didn't even make it to Hanli before the halos wiped them out of existence. However, the remaining bolts of lightning were able to pass directly through the giant gray mountain as if it were nothing more than an illusion. A burst of piercing blue light flashed within Hanli's eyes upon seeing this, and he immediately rose to his feet. An almighty devilish projection with 3 heads and 6 arms then appeared within the azure lotus flower before making a grabbing motion to summon a massive dark green sword. However, the projection paid no heed to the sword as a dense golden light barrier above it, and it clenched its 6 hands into tight fists before lashing out toward the heavens. A string of earth-shattering explosions rang out as a giant golden vortex appeared above the devilish projection before releasing a burst of fearsome power. The oncoming bolts of purplish golden lightning were impacted by this power, and most of it was drawn into the vortex in a flash. The little lightning that remained struck the golden light barrier above the devilish projection, causing it to tremor violently, but were unable to break through. This was the immortal secret technique, Origin Astral Barrier, that Hanli had cultivated. The purplish golden lightning fell continuously for over an hour before subsiding, but a series of purplish golden dragon projections then appeared in the sky. They opened their mouths in unison and house-sized balls of lightning came crashing down from the heavens. A resounding boom rang out as the light barrier above the devilish projection finally disintegrated along with the dozen or so purplish golden lightning dragons. The 5-colored cloud up above then parted while the thunderclaps subsided, and a giant expressionless face that had appeared in the sky also began to blur. A burst of piercing purple light flashed behind the giant face, and a long white rift was slowly opened up. This is the gate to the true immortal realm. At this point Hanli had already expended most of his magic power, but he was ecstatic as he reverted back to his human form. He looked up at the white rift with irrepressible excitement in his eyes, and right at this moment, the giant face that had almost completely faded suddenly opened its mouth again. A loud thunderclap rang out, and a bolt of rainbow lightning came crashing down from above, piercing through the giant lotus flower and reaching Hanli in a flash. Hanli was given a massive fright by this, and he hurriedly rubbed his hands together before raising them to release a burst of golden lightning. Immediately thereafter, he slashed his dark green wooden sword through the air to unleash a green sword projection. A thunderous boom rang out across the entire sky, and a burst of scintillating light that lit up virtually the entire sea appeared above Han Li before quickly being destroyed by bursts of law fluctuations. Han Li stumbled out into the open, and his face had turned extremely pale. His entire body was charred black, and the wooden sword in his hand had snapped in half. Han Li glanced down at what remained of his wooden sword, then looked up at the giant face in the sky, and upon discovering that it had actually disappeared on this occasion, he finally heaved a long sigh of relief. A black light formation appeared beside him amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, and Mo Guang, Huishuzi, Daoisye, and Jin Tong appeared at once. Hee, congratulations on transcending your tribulation, Brother Han. You'll be able to ascend to the true immortal realm soon. Indeed, I've finally transcended my ascension tribulation and am about to become an immortal, Han Li murmured in a trance-like state. A faint smile appeared on Mo Guang's face, and he was just about to say something further when dazzling light erupted out of the white rift in the sky, following which a white pillar of light descended to instantly envelop Han Li and the others. The pillar of light began to revolve and countless golden runes surged forth in a frenzy. At the same time, a burst of suffocating law fluctuations from the true immortal realm proliferated outward in all directions, instantly sweeping through every corner of the entire spirit realm. All of the Grand Ascension stage beings were ecstatic to sense these fluctuations, and they immediately closed their eyes to immerse themselves within it. Mo Guang and Huishuzi also exchanged an ecstatic glance upon seeing this, and the former vanished into Han Li's body as a burst of black chi, while the latter flew up Han Li's sleeve as a crimson fireball. Daoisye and Jin Tong were an immortal puppet and a spirit beast of Han Li's respectively, so they naturally didn't have to fear this pillar of light, and they also disappeared into a spirit beast bracelet on Han Li's wrist. At this moment, around a dozen streaks of light appeared in the distant sky before approaching Han Li as quickly as they could, but it was already too late. Han Li only caught a brief glimpse of Nangong Wan's urgent expression within one of the streaks of light before his body became completely weightless, and countless golden runes surrounded him, carrying him up toward the white rift along the pillar of light. In the instant that he entered the rift, Han Li's entire body stiffened, and he immediately fell unconscious.